You wake to the gentlest kind of authority. Late golden light across a whitewashed wall and the quiet weight of iron at your hip. The keys are already there, tucked under your belt, as if they slept more soundly than you. You blink once, twice, and the little room answers with simple things. A low beam, a straw tick that sighs, a cool patch where your feet find the shoes. You sit and take stock, because that is what you do. Breathe in, breathe out. The chamber smells of old rushes and clean dust, with a faint note of oil from last night's lamp. Your cloak hangs like a polite shadow. Your cap sulks on a peg. From below, the square sends up a padded murmur, one cart, one laugh, a shutter knocked by a patient hand. It is evening's edge, and your day, which is the market's bedtime, is about to begin. You stand, and the keys wake with you, iron teeth muttering against one another. You touch them out of habit, counting by feel. The long neck with the heart-shaped bow, the short one with the square head, the double bit that sticks until you breathe on it. Predictable companions. You prefer a latch that obeys. At the sill, you lift the latch and ease the leaded window. Outside, Bruges spreads itself in the soft, steady way it favors. The belfry leans as if listening stone ear over the Markt, pretending it doesn't notice your rounds and noticing everything. A draft slips in canal cool, a little damp, touched with yeast from someone baking too late, and you let it wash your face. You dress the rest of the way, breeches that know your knees, a shirt that smells of lye and sun, a sleeveless jerkin mended until the patching is its own pattern. Your belt finds its notch. The little handbell sits on the table, a brass pupil waiting for your hand. On the board beside it, the day's tablet, yesterday's chalk, a stub of sealing wax clinging to the wood like a lazy beetle. Everything is where you left it. Before you leave, you do the small ceremony that keeps you civil. You pour a little water from the glazed jug into the bowl, rinse your hands, dry them on the threadbare towel that refuses to dye. You smooth your eyebrows with damp fingers. You close the window to a finger's width and set the latch with the unimportant care that, in your experience, keeps the world from unraveling. The room can sleep until you return. On the stair, wood remembers you. The treads know your pace and scarcely creak. You carry the lamp unlit. Dusk is generous enough. The first door opens to the back of the arcades, and there you pause to listen, as you always listen. You like to catch the square mid-sentence, cloth folding, apples thumping from hand to basket, the scrape of a bench being dragged inward. A child asks a question that goes unanswered because the air has begun to thin around words. You step under the arches, and the last warmth of day settles on your cheeks. Light shoots sideways along the stone, making ordinary dust look almost intentional. Stalls wear the fatigue of usefulness. A trestle nods against its brace. A canopy sags. You give the nearest post a light pat in passing, the way you would greet a good mule. There is a pleasure in being the first to walk the evening path. No one else notices. You can take the line between the eastern steps and the fish stones without weaving. The market lets you through like water. A vendor lifts 2 fingers in your direction. You answer with one, which is not an insult, but an understanding that words are dear when baskets are heavy. Someone says your name and adds later, which is the perfect time for everything you do. You pause at your favored patch of worn flagging near the pump, where you can see the cloth hall doors and the north arcade together. This is your little theater. Traders shrinking their piles to look tidy, neighbors paying with coin and conversation, a pair of cats practicing moral disappointment near the fish gutters. You take the scene in like a careful draft of air and let it go again. A boy runs towards you and then remembers he is supposed to be tired. He slows, holds out a folded note with 2 hands. It is for the pillar board. You tuck it into the ledger for later and reward him with your grandest gift, a nod that says he exists. He beams as if you had minted him. People do the work. You simply lock it up and keep the peace between objects. The belfry exhales a single, thoughtful tone. Not curfew yet, just a hint that the day is thinking about retiring. Pigeons change their minds all at once and become roof ornaments. The canal takes what remains of the sky and pretends to be more serious than water is. You feel the square pull itself closer, like a blanket finding your shoulders. You start your feet moving because thought is less useful than motion. Left along the arcade, palm open to touch each pillar, as if reading a familiar prayer. You pass the brazier that smokes without malice. You pass the measures hanging from their hooks like tired bells. You pass the spot where a dairyman always leaves a smear of curd that tonight he has remembered to wipe away. Progress. You nod for him, in absence. At the west corner, you catch yourself standing still, as if you had forgotten something. You have. The small amusement you carry for balance. You put it on now. After all, who else is paid to listen to wood sigh and persuade brass to behave? You, the last person to lock the market, steward of hinges, master of appropriate silence. It is a small office, but it fits you like your old glove. You lift the handbell just enough to feel its weight. Promise it a quiet voice later, and let it rest again. No need to hurry. You have a route, and the route has you. The square is not a problem to be solved, but a companion to be walked, one measured length at a time. Breathe in, breathe out. You step forward, and the evening steps with you, content to be counted and gently closed. The ledger waits where you left it, thick-backed and calm, as if it too rested while the day untied its knots. You bring it to the low table beneath the arch where evening still threads gold through stone. The cover has that polished feel that only long usefulness can make. When you open to the ribbon, the paper gives a dry little sigh, a sound you trust more than talk. Ink sits where you put it yesterday, obedient and uncomplicated. You read yesterday's notes because the square likes you better when you remember it exactly. Names travel up before your eyes find them. The onion seller with blue thread at her cuffs, the wool man who dots his own name as if applause could be punctuated, the brewer who always signs in a flourish that looks like foam. Your hand, when you see it on the page, is plain and awake. It writes what happened and leaves opinion to people who are not responsible for locks. In the back pocket, slips fold against one another like birds at roost. You smooth them by habit. One asks to swap a stall for a week. One complains a weight has gone wandering. One, in a neat, careful hand, mentions that the south gate sticks at the turn. You nod at the paper for doing its duty. The market is not dramatic. It only needs someone to hear it when it clears its throat. You set the ledger open and pull the tablet closer. The chalk rides between finger and thumb the way it always has. A small, familiar passenger. Today's list is yesterday's list, kindly refreshed. North arcade shutters, cloth hall doors, braziers covered, lanterns trimmed, side gates bolted, weighing stones counted, rent box sealed, keys returned at the niche. You add 2 quiet extras, inspect south hinge, and remind fishmonger about gutters, because memory is good, and writing is better. The purse of small coins sits in the drawer. Patient is bred. You count them in 2s and then in 5s, not from suspicion, but because numbers like to be greeted. Oil, sand, a new brush before harvest, each purpose touches your mind and drifts off again. The wax scrap, the color of old honey, waits its turn without argument. The keys nudge your hip like children, with respectable manners. You unhook the ring and set them down one by one, so each can be greeted. The long-barreled fellow with the heart-shaped bow belongs to the cloth hall. He always expects a little ceremony. The short, square bowed one minds the canal side gate and pretends indifference. The heavy double-bitted elder manages the west doors and approves of caution. You lay them first by length, then by temperament, which is not a science but works. You touch each key until its teeth live in your palm. Iron holds dusk the way a stone holds warmth. It smells of oil and rain that has already been useful. You roll the bows under your thumb to feel for burrs that would scratch a lock plate and create conversation you do not need. A nick earns a rub with a scrap of wool. A slow turn earns a breath and a drop from the tidy tin of oil that lives like a proverb in your pocket. Soon the family settles. They remember how to behave. Beside the keys, the little handbell holds its tongue. You touch the rim with your thumbnail and feel, rather than hear, the shy answer in the brass. The market does not need summoning yet. It prefers the suggestion that night is agreeable and bed is already turned down. You return to the ledger and read the last lines aloud in your head. The words, taste of work done properly, fees collected, lantern oil measured, weight stones tallied, gate tested. You draw a neat bar after the final entry not to shut anything out, only to give the day its edge. A narrow pinch of sand, falls from the shaker to settle the fresh ink. You breathe on it, because you enjoy being useful even to your own handwriting. By your boot sits a small, abandoned basket, the weave keeping the shape of someone's day. You lift it and set it on the bench with a neat note, "To Weaver, Bench 3, so morning will know where to find itself." The ledger accepts the line without ceremony, which is exactly the ceremony you like. You fold the slips and tuck them with the ribbon. The note about the south gate still taps gently at your sleeve. You mark a small flourish beside "Side gates bolted" to remind the later version of you to look up at the hinge before you look down at the lock. Your letters round themselves without hurry. Even when your fingers go cold, the script does not complain. The light has thinned by a comfortable degree. What remains is the kind that flatters edges and tells the truth about fit. Doors speak more honestly in this hour. They consent or they do not, and either way, they explain themselves in wood tone and iron speech. You like them that way. You like most things that prefer plain statements to embroidery. You hook the keys back to your belt, and their weight chooses its familiar place against your hip. The ledger slides beneath your arm for the short walk along the pillars, not as a burden, but as a reminder that order has a pleasant heft. You set the chalk exactly with the tablet's corner so that you will not have to look for it later. Small mercies accumulate. They might even be the whole craft. At the first pillar, you rest your palm against the stone. It is cool and slightly gritty, which is how pillars say they are doing well. You nod to it, "Well done," and the pillar, being a pillar, continues to be excellent at standing. A breath, another breath. The square lowers its voice another notch. Cats begin to look important. Somewhere, a handle knocks gently, the way a friend might clear a throat without expecting an answer. You begin the evening properly. Ledger open to the page. Tablet tucked under your arm. Keys aligned by feel. Feet aimed at the north arcade where the shutters keep their well-bred complaints. Nothing theatrical waits for you, which is the point. The work is a good coat. It fits because you put it on the same way each night. You move forward, and the list comes with you. Content, already half asleep. You take the stones the way you always do, as if they were a set of patient books you read with your feet. 1, 2, 3, 4, your soles know the shallow bowls worn into the cobbles, where cartwheels have practiced their letters for a few centuries. The city answers in small sounds. A hinge stretching, a rope creaking where a bucket rests against a well lip, a respectful cough of water under the arch of a footbridge. Bruges does not try to impress you. It does not need to. It leans on its habits, and you lean on them with it. The lane slips between houses that pretend to ignore one another. Window shutters knock softly in the evening breeze, like neighbors exchanging mild opinions through a wall. Nothing scandalous, just the wooden version of "Good night, then." A half-open shutter shows a slice of table with a jug and the slant of a loaf under a cloth. You do not stare. You are good at not staring. Your craft is to see without tugging at anything you see. Your steps keep their quiet count, the numbers making a low fence in your head so thoughts don't wander into thickets. 5, 6, 7. A small pause at the place where the cobbles tilt toward the drain and the moss tries to be more than green. The air tastes of water and yeast and some civilized smoke, the kind that chooses to be a line rather than a cloud. A laundress slaps a cloth against a board, and then, remembering the hour, slaps more softly. You nod to her back, which is at least as eloquent as most faces. Beyond the corner, a canal shoulder runs along you like a sensible companion. Ducks arrange themselves as if expecting a portrait. They receive none, which is not a loss to the world. On the far bank, a shed sighs into its posts, discovering once again that evening does not require opinions. You watch the light sow itself into the water's slight wrinkles, gold thread, blue thread, then the faint gray that says the day is folding itself away without fuss. You pass a door with a worn threshold whose center is lower than its sides because people prefer the middle even when wood does not. The iron latch bears a thumb's bright mark, a little oval of honesty, polished by everyone and owned by no one. Somewhere upstairs a chair leg complains and is answered with the soft employer's voice of a rug. Ordinary authority at work, your favorite kind. Past the Coopers, the lane widens just enough to pretend it is generous. You count again 8, 9, 10, catching yourself smiling at nothing in particular. A boy carries a hoop under his arm, the way a clerk carries a roll of papers. He holds himself serious for 2 strides, then remembers he is 9, and lets the hoop go, then remembers the hour and stops it with his knee. You lift one finger to your cap. He nods with the gravity of a guildmaster and vanishes through a side gate that shuts itself with more enthusiasm than necessary. The belfry shows a sliver of itself above the rooftops ahead, not so much looming as considering. Even from here, you feel the square gather its edges the way a bed gathers sheets when someone sensible tucks them in. You adjust the ledger under your arm until it sits perfectly square, because a square deserves squares, and squares appreciate being understood. A cart rattles from behind and then slows, embarrassed by its own noise. You step aside to let a wheel hum past your knee. The driver flicks 2 fingers, a tip of a hat he is not wearing. You look into the cart long enough to see barrels lashed with rope that has obeyed its knots. The horse smells of dry hay and tired leather. Its ears twitch in the courteous rhythm of a creature that answers questions you do not ask. At a small crossing, a trickle of apprentices slides around you, all elbows and direction. Their shoes have not yet learned how to fall softly. One glances at your keys, the way young hands glance at useful objects they do not own. You place your palm on the ring, not protectively, just as a reminder to the metal that it belongs to its work, and its work belongs to you. The apprentices dissolve down a side street, and the air fills the space they leave as if nothing had disturbed it. You take the stone steps of a footbridge, counting without announcing the numbers to yourself. The railing keeps its splinters to itself. From the crown of the arch, you see the square's roofline arrange itself like a handwriting you have learned by heart. Gables and chimneys write the usual sentence. We are here. We will be here in the morning. Do not hurry. You choose not to hurry. You descend. The last tread accepts your weight with the small, satisfied grunt of wood that has done this politely since before you were born. A house front displays a painted sign of a sheaf and a pair of shears, the paint subdued by weather into a fine stubbornness. Behind its glass, a candle refuses to admit it is small. Its light occupies the window, as if every night were an appointment it intends to keep. You pass, and the candle continues its small, courageous work without asking for your opinion. You meet a smell going the other way, fish that made its decision hours ago. It lingers along the stones with the dignity of things that are finished. 2 cats pace it like guards escorting a minor official to the city gate. You avoid the damp patch where the gutter returns to being a gutter instead of a guest. Your boot finds the dry line of stone that has always kept its promise. It is pleasant to be loyal to a thing that deserves loyalty. The street opens as you approach the Markt. Sound changes. What was a scatter of household noises becomes a single hand gathered into a sleeve. You can hear stall frames folding, tied canvas slumping into bundles, the peaceable thud of weights being nested. Someone laughs the last laugh of the day, the short kind that means enough. The belfry offers another measured tone, less a bell than a breath. You do not answer. You are already answering by arriving. Shutters near the square knock again, softer now, as if practicing good manners for the night. A woman stands in her doorway, hands resting in her apron, watching a husband coax a cart backward without improving it. She sees you and her chin lifts a quiet degree. You reply with the modest ceremony of your cap. She turns to her house satisfied that authority, however small, is awake and walking. You cross the last run of cobbles, those particular stones that have decided over time to be flat for the sake of wheels and the nervous. Your steps slow by themselves, the way feet do when entering a room where the furniture knows its names. The square is before you, generous and almost empty, its center holding the day's remaining heat. The stalls are not yet asleep, only yawning. The arcades wait, shadowed and sure. The cloth hall looks pleased that someone remembered to bring a ledger. You breathe in the square as if it were a bowl of warm broth, steady and uncomplicated. You pause at your habitual start point, the corner where the north arcade and the long row of benches shake hands. You place the ledger on the bench accepts it. The keys shift against your hip, volunteering their order. You look across the stones one more long, slow glance, and feel the market recognize you the way a weary child recognizes the person who will tuck it in. Your hands are empty of hurry. Your head is full of the root. Evening raises an eyebrow and nods. All right then, begin. You nod first to the cloth merchant because she has earned the nod by packing before the bell. Her table is already smaller than at noon. Bolts lie in a tidy army, cords tied, ends tucked like polite tongues. She smooths the last length with the back of her hand. A purse clinks like rain in leather. 2 coins warm your palm. You chalk her line plain and straight. The board approves without comment. Beyond her, the basket seller stacks his own work as if he were planting a hedge against night. Willow shines where hands have polished it all day. You test the trestle with a careful boot. It promises to stand until morning without adventure. He presses a cracked walnut into your hand, as if it were part of the tariff. You take it because courtesy comes in many shapes, and pockets are patient. The herb woman closes her jars one by one, lids turning with modest clay whispers. Mint, then sage, then fennel. The air lifts its head at each name and settles again. She ties string with the certainty of someone who trusts knots more than promises. For you, she keeps a pinch of marigold for the eyes and pays 3 coins and a smile that pretends to be secret. Your chalk writes the amount. The board does not care for secrets. At the fish stones, the day's last silver becomes plain food. The fishmonger rinses his table with a bucket and a practiced arm. You stand near enough to be a reminder and far enough to avoid a fragrance that travels. He lays 2 coins on the wood, then adds a thin strip of salt herring wrapped in paper, the bribe that isn't a bribe. You promise to forget it kindly. A fruit seller gathers bruised apples into a low basket, sets aside the soundest for tomorrow, and feeds the boldest gulls the rest. She gives you a copper and a sigh that weighs less than the copper. You prefer the coin. Sighs wander after dark. Your chalk keeps its even pace, numbers growing like fence posts. Along a field you could walk blind. Each mark a little fence against confusion. A brewer's boy arrives with a shoulder broad enough to stack hopes on. He collects empties, ties them with a strap, and tries to whistle as if cheer were permitted at this hour. He fails gracefully. You lift a strap to show that an impartial hand has checked it, mark the tally, and nod. He winks as if a guild secret passed between you, then staggers away, buckets arguing quietly against his knees and losing. Under the arcade, a seamstress pins her last bundle, each stitch waiting patiently for tomorrow's conversation with a sleeve. She pays with careful fingers that count twice, and thanks you for counting once. Your chalk line for her is extra straight, because she appreciates lines. Small economies, small rewards. At this scale, the world behaves, and you behave with it, which keeps everyone content enough to sleep. Near the pump, a cooper shoulders an empty cask and looks at the sky, as if asking for a weather opinion that will not arrive. He sets the cask down, tells it to stand, and it stands. A good citizen. He grins at you with the tidy weariness of a man who has not wasted the day on cleverness. 2 coins pass. The tablet gains another modest truth. You brush the corner with a thumb to settle the chalk. You make a slow circuit, letting your feet decide who comes next. A stray measure has gone exploring. You return it to its hook with a forgiving pat. A length of twine dangles like a lazy thought. You pocket it because lazy thoughts become snares if you let them. Gratitude lightens the broom later and costs you nothing. At the edge of the square, shutters half close like eyelids considering sleep. A tinker nests his pans, each contact a small moon tapping another. He tilts 2 lids so they kiss and separate without crowding. You take his coin, mark his stall, and receive the faintest ring in return, as if metal were clearing its throat politely. The market approves of simple manners and repays them with quiet. You are not a tacksman, not a judge, not a priest. You are the person the evening trusts with a board, a bell, and the habit of ending things where they belong. It is a small geography, steady as a good table. Your nods are even. The broom waits, loyal as a dog, already plotting its modest path through husks and peelings. A cheese seller folds her cloth with slow care, wraps the remaining wheel, binds it like a sleeping child. She pays 2 thick coins and 1 thin. The thin insists on telling a lean year's tale. You let it talk, then set it with the others so money can do its older task of forgetting. Light resigns without ceremony. What remains is a mild brightness that does not argue with shadows. Your chalk marks settle into honest columns. The tablet grows handsomely speckled. Your cuffs turn faintly pale. You blow once across the board. A little cloud lifts, making the air look briefly thoughtful. The square exhales, as if the day's belt had been loosened a notch for comfort. By the pillar board, you pin the boy's message. Spare stall wanted for 2 days, in exchange for cordage. You smooth the ribbon that keeps the notes obedient. Someone tomorrow will answer. Someone tomorrow always does. You are only the hinge that lets the promise swing. Hinges do not claim credit. They work, they get oiled, they wait, and the door opens because such hinges exist. The last coins of the round sit warm in your purse. You draw the strings with 2 easy turns, tuck it away, and find your hand already reaching for the broom's worn handle. Before sweeping, 2 small errands. Visit the brazier. Lift the iron lid to see the coals thinking darkly. Promise them a blanket of ash. Then the lamp board, where wicks wait to be trimmed so night can see itself without strain. You pause and take one more look across the square. Outlines thin and quiet. Cats linger by the fish stones. The air taste of fennel, rope, and the canal's cool breath. Coins, chalk, nods, and the market trimmed to a size that sleep can keep good measures. You tap the bell softly against your palm. Not yet. First the sweeping, then the shutting, then the ring. The routine is a kindly road. You begin the slow circuit the way a mill turns, not because anyone urges it forward, but because it knows its path and takes it calmly, bench to bench, table to table. Your eyes relearn what the day prefers to forget. Here, 3 onion skins curled like little boats, proof that someone bargained and someone agreed. There, a length of cord that tried to become a snake and failed. You wind it around your palm and pocket it for the drawer where all useful accidents sleep. A trestle gives a tired breath when you brush past. A familiar wooden complaint that means nothing and everything at once. At the first empty pitch, a chalk ring on the stone shows where a scale stood all afternoon, a ghost of careful commerce. You touch the circle with your thumb and rub it smooth, not to erase anything, but to make the evening surfaces friendly again. The air is already chosen to be cooler, as if memory itself had opened a door and let out a little heat. You step, and the square answers with very small noises. Twine rasped from a peg, canvas folding like tame thunder, the last metal clink of a nested weight. A cabbage leaf lies near a drain, glossy like a small pond under the thinning light. You slide it with the broom head into your wicker pan, feeling the soft protest of veined green against straw. A pair of hazelnut shells, enough to remember somebody's pocket, click politely together. You could reconstruct the day from such relics if asked. Fortunately, no one asks. Your craft prefers the humbler story. The market was busy, it grew tired, and now it wishes to rest. The cheese, seller's board, holds a ring of damp darker than the surrounding wood. The place where a wheel waited for its owner like a well-behaved dog. You touch the stain, and it answers with the faintest salt. She left on time. You watched her rope the wheel's belly and lift with her knees, which is how sensible people keep their backs marching into winter. On the slat beneath the board, you find a wooden pin, a neat little dowel. Into the pocket it goes, to be argued with the other pins later about which one belongs where, an argument you will settle without passion and with a drop of oil. Across the stones, a spice jar lid grins face down. You set it upright on the stall's edge so the morning can see its shame and forgive it. The herb woman will nod, and you will pretend not to notice the nod, which is the accepted ritual for small salvations. Your boots carry you to the next bench, where the basket seller's last coil of willow has loosened like a tired braid. You tuck the end through, tug once, and the world is improved by a finger's breadth, exactly the scale at which you prefer to operate. At the fish stones, cats present their petitions in silent language. You decline with a slow sweep, ushering scales and pride into the pan in the same movement. The fishmonger has rinsed properly tonight. The gutter accepts your approval with a clean run. You lean a moment on the broom and let the scent pass you as if you were a sensible pillar. The cats forgive you at once because forgiveness costs them nothing and may collect interest. One stall over, you observe a coin-sized circle of clean stone where a cup sat so long that the dust drew a halo around it. The cup is gone. Its memory endures. A little lecture on stillness. You pass your toe across the ring and it softens, which is enough philosophy for one square. You pick 3 pieces of torn paper from the crack by the pillar brown. stiff, probably wrapping for almonds, and gather them with the mild superiority of someone who knows what paper ought to do when the work is over. A folded scrap peeks from under a bench leg. You kneel, pull it out, and find a list written in careful letters. Salt, thread, tallow, 2 needles, 1 laugh. The last item is a joke aimed at the writer, and therefore lost on everyone else. You pin the list on the pillar board and let the ribbon hold it. Tomorrow, the owner may blush or pretend not to know it. Your contribution is to let the world keep its small mysteries without developing a taste for larger ones. You pass the cloth hall doors and let your fingers remember the iron band's texture, ridged like the edge of a good loaf. The key for these doors weighs slightly more than cents, which is why you admire it. Later, you will give it the attention it insists upon. For now, you make notes with your fingertips. This strap sits proud by the width of a fingernail. That lower hinge asks for a kindness of oil. The middle bar is as it should be, which is to say, invisibly excellent. By a bench where the fruit seller laughed this morning, a single pear seed has found the joint between stones and proposed a tree. You deny the petition with a thumb and send the seed to the pan, where it joins onion, paper, and the day's bravest cabbage, all heading toward the common fate of night. You imagine, for one measured breath, a pear tree in the center of the Markt offering shade to respectable hats and opinions. Then you return to your work, which is to prevent such suggestions from becoming traditions. At the North Arcade, you pause to look up, because roofs tell truth in this light. Thatch edges sit square. No curl suggests a smoky thought. The beam ends are sober, not scorched. You sniff as a matter of friendship, not suspicion. A mild tar, cool wood, an honest draught. All well. Your knuckles tap the nearest post, and the post, being a post, does nothing further than exist satisfactorily. Good. You continue. Who has already gone? The tinker, efficient. The brewer's boy, blessedly. The onion woman, at the sensible hour. Who lingers? The seamstress, tying the last bundle as if the knot were a lullaby. The cooper, who will leave when his arms decide they have had enough of themselves. The fishmonger, prowling for items that might be accused of belonging to him at dawn. You greet each with a tilt of the head calibrated for evening. Neither welcome nor warning, only the comfortable acknowledgement of neighbors engaged in quitting the day. A small dog consults your ankles, finds no food there, and relocates to a different philosophy. You approve. The broom whispers its private language along the stone shuff, and your pan grows modestly heavy. A peel slips free. You scoop it with a practiced toe and add it to the story you are gathering. If anyone asked you what you do, you could reply, I collect the day and make it small enough to sleep. Along the canal side, a broken rush from a rushlight lies like punctuation. You lift it and hold it up to the thin light, its pith gone to lace. Into the pan it goes, the closing bracket of someone's evening. You straighten the rent box table with a nudge. The leg had been pretending to be shorter than its friends. The box itself, for later, sits with lid ajar, a teasing future that you will settle with wax when the time has the right temperature. At the pump you pause, draw the lever half a stroke. Listen to the throat of the iron answer with a contented gulp, and let it rest again. You tilt sand from a small sack into your palm, test the grit, and scatter a light pinch where the stones shine too honestly. The square accepts the correction without fuss. No one will thank you for sand that prevented a slip. You will accept the lack of thanks as the reward it is. You visit the pillar board again and press each pin. The ribbon is taut. The notes sit like well-behaved birds. The message about the south gate repeats its suggestion that you look kindly on hinges. You have already promised. You add a gentle twist to the ribbon knot, not to tie it tighter, but to let your fingers confirm it will hold till morning. It will. By now, your circuit has made a shape on the square, an invisible loop stitched through corners and edges. You do not hurry to close it. Work at this hour is a conversation with objects that prefer whispers. You sweep again where sand will be needed later, sketching a map of where slipperiness has ambitions. You mark the places in your mind near the fish stones, by the pump, at the cloth hall step, and the map settles inside you as lightly as breath. A stray button glints under a bench, as if auditioning for the moon. You pick it up and turn it once in your fingers. Bone, plain, honest. It joins the dowel and the cord in your pocket, a small guild of orphans waiting for their morning reunion. Beside it, a single stitch of blue thread clings to the splinter of a plank. You smooth the splinter with the back of your nail. Fewer snags tomorrow. Small mercies deserve their due. You end the round back where you began, because circles do that when they are well drawn. The pan is respectably full. The broom feels lighter for having spoken. The square has removed its jewelry and sits in its work clothes, which are the best clothes for sleeping. You place the gathered scraps in the barrel by the clerk's door, cover them with a handful of ash so no scent will bother the night, and knock the broom once on the threshold to tell it you noticed its efforts. You look across the benches one more time, counting without numbers. Enough has been done. Enough remains to give meaning to the next hour. You set the pan to its hook, settle the broom against the pillar in the angle it prefers, and give the air a nod that says, "Proceed." The market answers by becoming a shade quieter, as if it had been waiting politely for your permission to relax. You accept the compliment and move on. Your tablet is a small plain sky, and chalk is the weather you prefer. You bring the board to your knee, angle it to the evening, and touch the first column where names wait in their quiet queue. Coins already sit where their owners placed them, small sons gone thoughtful. Your purse is fed this neat procession. Your hand will feed the ledger. Between them, the chalk has the pleasant job of being obvious. You begin with the cloth, merchant's line. Your chalk makes the simplest of announcements beside her name. One short mark, then another, then another, each like a fence post along a straight lane. When 5 have gathered, you lay the tidy cross stroke that tells the brain it may relax and start again. Nothing dramatic. The brain approves of little fences. You count them twice, not suspicion, only the politeness of numbers greeting one another. A breeze slips under the arcade and lifts chalk dust into a small pale cloud. It settles on your cuffs and gives them the expression of having thought things through. You blow once across the board and watch a tiny season change. The marks remain. Good weather does not rearrange the hedges. You touch the next row. Basket seller, 3 posts and a cross stroke. Herb woman, 2 posts and a pause. Fishmonger, a full honest set with room for tomorrow to begin sensibly. Your chalk squeaks once, apologizes, and falls into its proper fluency. Your fingers, white at the tips, look like they have been educated by stone and education you recommend. Coins receive their turn. You spill them into your palm and tilt them back into the purse in small families. Copper offers quantity. Silver offers opinion. You accept both with the same even nod. You test edges with your thumbnail, a quick lesson to mend the manners of any coin that has been nibbled by bad company. Most are decent. Those that are not will spend the night in the corner of the purse where reflection is encouraged. Back to the tablet. The brewer's boy has left his modest monument on your board. 3 gates of 5. 1 lonely post looking for its future. You add that future in the most efficient way. You breathe. The air believes you. The mark waits until the purse has agreed with the hand. Agreement arrives. You draw the post. Harmony resumes. You are not a philosopher, though the work invites you the thought that marks do not exist until coins do, and that both are calmer when written. You leave the thought where it belongs, on the far shelf of your mind, cheerful and dusty. You have a column for things that are not coins but behave like them. Broom bristle replaced, a dab of oil taken, a pinch of sand scattered where the day insisted on being slippery. These are debts you owe to your tools in the square. You mark them here with a small curl instead of a post, a private sign you invented and told no one, because secrecy that helps you remember is not mischief. Later, the ledger will receive these as simple words: oil, broom, sand. For now, the curls look like neat, quiet waves and please you. The tablet's wood bears old scratches you know by fingertip. You let your thumb stroll along one while you review the cloth hall column in your head. You say the mark silently, first along the chalk, then backward, then in pairs, until the numbers turn from counting into confidence. You were a child once at a table too high for your elbows, moving beans from one bowl to another, and discovering that a good count makes the world less noisy. You keep that table inside you. It has never argued. From the shadow of the pillar, a hand appears with a late coin. The seamstress, eyes already halfway to home, offers it with the weight of a favor you did not have to do. You receive it as if it were the most ordinary thing. That is how you both like kindness, disguised as habit. The chalk adds a post with no fuss. The purse mutters approval. The board looks more complete by the width of a fingernail. She leaves before you can nod. You let the nod happen anyway, and feel better for having paid it. Your chalk grows short. You flip it end to end, then pinch the new edge with your knife, shaving off a crescent so the point will speak clearly. The shaving rides the air, then lands on your sleeve and stays like a tiny moon, which seems about right for the hour. You consider fetching the spare stub from your pocket and decide against it. This piece has one more round in it, and deserves to finish its evening in service. A boy appears, not the messenger from before, a different one with ears too alert to be honest. He looks at your board the way a sparrow looks at a crumb. You angle it away without malice. He grins, which is not a crime, and vanishes among the pillars with the silent speed of someone who will be a runner or a nuisance, depending on which hand life offers. You note that your coins are still there, because of course they are. Then scold yourself for checking. Then forgive yourself for checking. Forgiveness costs little and wears well. You run a fingertip under the column labeled lanterns, a gentle rehearsal for the next hour's trimming and oiling. 2 last night, 1 this morning to replace a wick that forgot its manners, and the tall lamp by the west doors that has begun to prefer smoke to light. You make a small mark beside its name, a reminder to hold the snuffer longer and tell it a firm story about cooperation. Lamps listen if you speak in calm sentences and bring oil. The rent box sits on the little table like a contented animal that expects to be fed on time. You resist the urge to seal it now. The wax is patient. You will give it the proper ceremony when the square's voice drops another note. For the moment you write the sum you have placed inside, not the smallest unit, not the largest, but the comfortable middle that pleases the ledger's eye. Then you add a thin line, straight as the edge of a ruler you do not own, to remind yourself that totals like to sit with tidy neighbors. You check each name against each post against each coin against the purse's new weight, and then the circle again with the slow certainty of someone tightening a lid. The square, considerate of your task, offers no interruption beyond the faint gossip of a bird settling under a roof tile. You listen to the bird, approve its choice, and return to work. You blow across the board once more, not to erase, only to put the marks to bed. A small fog rises, touches your face, and drifts away toward the canal, where it will become someone else's soft evidence. You lift the tablet and tilt it to the last of the light. The columns gleam as if pleased with themselves. You would not argue with them. In a world that misplaces pins and forgets baskets, a straight line is a moral achievement. You close the chalk with your palm and rap the board lightly against your knee to settle anything that meant to wander. The sound is a dry, domestic knock, the kind that belongs to drawers that fit. You slide the tablet under your arm and stroke the ledger's spine with the back of your fingers, the way you might reassure a patient horse. It is time to copy the day from chalk to ink, to exchange one kind of honesty for another, but not at once. First you breathe, because breathing is the best counter you own. In, out, the purse heavy, the board orderly, the market content to be counted. The belfry offers a single, unambitious note. Less an opinion than a reminder that night, like arithmetic, is inevitable. You nod as if the bell had asked your permission to proceed, and since you are responsible for locks, you grant it graciously. Your fingers close around the chalk again, almost fondly, and add the night's last small post beside the name of the basket seller, who slipped you the cracked walnut and forgot to pay for the cord that tied his last stack. You remember without thinking, mark without frowning, and allow yourself a small private sentence. The world is not strict, and neither are you, but both of you straighten before sleep. The mark looks back at you with the satisfying face of enough. You set the chalk down, pick up the purse, and feel the register of weight that tells your wrist how the day went. It went as days go, in the right direction, at the right speed, with enough left over to encourage tomorrow. You tie the purse, place it inside the drawer, and close the drawer until wood meets wood, and says in its patient way, "That will do." You agree. The board agrees. The square, if asked, would agree too. Agreement, in the end, is what you are hired to close. The The fishmonger sees you coming the way. A ship sees its harbor light, relieved, mildly resigned, and already telling a story to nobody. He stands at his stones with sleeves rolled, hands damp, and the sort of dignity that only someone who has outlived many opinions can comfortably wear. The day has been long for him. The sea insists on early mornings, even when the town does not. You stop an arm's length away, where brine becomes data instead of theater. Evening, he says, as if the square had invented the word for his particular use. He flicks water from his fingertips. Little stars land on the stone and go thoughtful. A final pair of herrings gleam like folded tin. An eel, already arranged into obedience, wears the curl you prefer to see on a creature that is done arguing. The fishmonger nudges a wooden gutter stick with his boot, as if to remind himself that tomorrow owns its own trouble. You nod, which in your profession translates to proceed bravely with soap. A line of cats has formed at the respectful distance cats adopt when they are certain you are unreasonable. They sit like dignitaries awaiting the conclusion of a minor treaty. Whiskers forward, tails arranged as paragraphs, eyes speaking volumes about municipal fairness. You consider them briefly, find their case eloquent and unconvincing, and return to the matter of water. The fishmonger upends a bucket over the stones. The gray tide runs quick, carrying away scales that look like tiny coins that decline to pay. You watch the wash trace the shallow channel toward the drain. The drain answers with its usual thoughtful swallow. Good. The curve is clean. The stones shine honestly, and no slick ambition remains to trip a porter who has already made enough concessions to gravity for one lifetime. You'll remind me I've remembered, he says, a man accustomed to both guilt and improvement. You tilt your head toward the gutter, and then toward the cats. He understands. He takes a scrap, holds it up for feline inspection, and then, after a consultation of eyes, presents it to the group as if serving a treaty's ceremonial snack. The cats accept with grave economy. One chews as if it were dictating an opinion. One simply holds the morsel and thinks about trust. Your keys nod against your belt, satisfied with the orderly exchange. He counts coins into your open palm too, then one that tried to be 3 and failed, then another to apologize on its behalf. They are warm with the heat of his day. They clink as if deciding which pocket they liked better. You slide them into your purse and mark his name on the tablet with a line that starts true and ends modestly. A fair portrait of the man. The chalk leaves an even stripe. The board enjoys being right. He wipes his blade on a cloth that has learned humility. You admire the edge without saying so. Sharpness is a private matter between a craftsman and his tool, and praise, in your square, is best handled by absence of complaint. He folds the cloth, sets it in the box, and closes the lid. The hinge answers with a small, faithful sound, the sort of noise you would hire if noises could be apprenticed. Storm out there? You ask. Not for gossip, but because weather likes to be acknowledged. He shrugs a shoulder that has known ropes and opinions. Not yet, he says, which covers most forecasts. The canal gives a cool breath across the back of your neck. The belfry answers with a single tone that is not curfew, but may be related to it. You and the fishmonger stand a breath longer in a companionship, made mostly of not needing to speak. He reaches for the shutter, that stubborn plank that prefers negotiation. You move a half step and place your palm against the beam while he guides the lower brace. The wood remembers you both. It concedes with a soft, grainy sigh. The bar finds its cradle. The latch drops into the small, approving square of iron with the particular click that means until morning. You do not applaud. You are not an audience. Locks are your habit, and this one has behaved in front of you, which is all it ever needed to do. A cat, perhaps emboldened by diplomacy, hops onto the stone and studies the clean water lane. It places one paw delicately, then another, and stops, unsure whether a wholly honest surface can be trusted. You refrain from comment, which is a form of wisdom. The fishmonger snorts inside his throat. The cat pretends it heard nothing. The evening grows a shade older without injury. You lift your handbell and weigh it for the signal you have not yet given. The man nods. He prefers to be gone before the market states things publicly. You respect that. He shoulders his basket, now more wicker than weight, and gives you a short salute with the empty knife hand. It is a gesture that would be rude with a blade and affectionate without one. You grant him your smallest bow, the useful size that fits between neighbors without attracting ambition. He steps away, shoes remembering salt that no longer clings to them, and vanishes along the arcade with the pace of someone who has earned tomorrow's quiet. You look down at the stone. A scale clings in the groove near the brace, a lone, bright confession. You lift it with a fingernail and flick it into the pan so the square will not dream about it. The cats assess the fairness of your act and decide, after a committee pause, to accept the verdict. You test the shutter with both hands. Press. Pause. Press again. The wood yields without argument. The iron strap lies flat, promising to think calmly for the duration of the night. You give the latch a final, approving tap with the back of your knuckle. The sound is small and complete, like a period at the end of a simple sentence. You like sentences that end when they should. A gull calls once, more an opinion than a plan. The canal adds a damp syllable. Somewhere, a door draws breath and holds it until a latch decides to be brave. The cats, treaty satisfied, disperse into their private jurisdictions under a trestle, behind a stack of crates, along the narrow parliament of shadows near the drain. They will appear again at dawn and pretend not to know you. You are not offended. You enter the small marks in the tablet. Fee received, gutter rinsed, shutter secured, cats negotiated. You add your private curl beside sand to remind your shoes to return with a pinch for this very spot, which will be invitingly slippery if left to its own ideas. The chalk nods along the wood. Your sleeve carries a fine dust that makes you look thoughtful and pleases you out of proportion to its importance. Before you move on, you place your palm flat on the cool, clean stone where fish were fish and then became supper. You do this not for ceremony, but so your hand will recall the square's temperature when you later think about wax and wick. The stone tells you what you need. The night will be mild. The oil will behave. The wax will take a seal without sulking. You remove your hand. The stone continues being stone admirably. You step back, the handbell settling against your palm without ringing. The key ring content at your hip. The fish corner has folded itself into the square's longer hush. No boast, no flourish, only a polite conclusion. You prefer it that way. Your task is not to make the market sleep, only to tuck its covers where drafts lose interest. You give the cats one more glance curfew's earliest audience, and they blink with the superiority of creatures who plan to ignore curfew forever. You turn toward the lantern board, the brazier beyond, the rest of your evening's measured obligations. Behind you, the shutter keeps its promise. Ahead, the arcades practice their night voices along the stone, low and untroubled. You carry on, neither hurried nor slow, exactly as the hour deserves. You take up the broom as if greeting a colleague who never calls in sick. The handle fits your palm, where years have taught it the shape of you. Bristles splay a little, a stiff, honest fan of twig and straw, bound with wire that has decided to grow old without resentment. The wicker pan waits on the other side of your boot, mouth open like a polite yawn. Evening has moved one finger further down the sky. It is a good hour for small noises. You set the broom at a shallow angle and begin with the grain husks near the baker's pitch. They are light, stubborn, and convinced they matter. The bristles coax them into a soft parade. They whisper along the stones like cloth being folded in another room. You guide them toward the pan with slow strokes that teach the edges to behave. One way, two ways. Then the quiet scoop where your boot holds the pan steady and the broom, with a neat shove, persuades the heap to slide home. Husks, peelings, and the biographies of nuts accept their fate. A shard of eggshell debates, loses, and slips in after them. You find a pearl of barley that insists on rolling. You cup it with a fingertip before it enlists in mischief. Dust rises and does nothing, which is precisely the level of ambition you prefer from dust. You breathe through your nose, the air tasting faintly of flour and day-old apples. From the canal comes a cool word, damp and sensible. You steer the broom along the seam where stone meets pillar, that favorite hiding place of crumbs and regrets. The bristles talk their faithful language, shh, shh, and the corner gives up its collection without making a case. A curl of orange peel tries to be a map of an island. You erase geography with two strokes and watch the map accept exile. A single clove bud lies there like a punctuation mark the spice stall forgot to claim. Into the pan it goes. still smelling like an idea. By the pump you scatter a thin veil of sand, where water has made the stones too proud. The grit takes the shine down to a good dull honesty. You draw the broom backward once, smoothing the spread the way you would smooth a blanket on a bed for a guest you expect to rest properly. The broom approves. The stones, pleased with their own reasonableness, keep quiet. You prefer floors that do not argue. At the vegetable pitch, celery threads cling to a crack with the tenacity of gossip. You fetch the hook-ended twig from your belt, the humble tool for humble resistance, and coax the strands into daylight. The broom does the rest, happy to deal with such manageable heroics. You lean the broom a moment, flex your fingers, and pour the pan's modest harvest into the lidded barrel by the clerk's door. Ash sits on top like a thoughtful blanket, ready to keep sense from practicing after-hours speeches. You close the lid with the decorum due to tomorrow's noses. You return to the square's center where the day's footprints have retired, but left their small opinions behind. Here, a scatter of oat chaff. There, the brittle petal of a marigold that once advertised a jar. The broom teaches them to like togetherness, and the pan, generous as always, adopts them. Your knees mark the rhythm that your arms follow. In this light, your shadow looks industrious without trying. It sweeps when you sweep, obedient for once. A gull feathers down, considers the pan, considers you, and reconsiders its prospects. You are flattered to have been weighed and found unprofitable. A child's marble appears by the rent box table blue, glassy, a small universe that took the wrong turn at afternoon. You trap it with the broom head, lift it with 2 fingers, and set it on the bench. It must roll again tomorrow, not tonight. You are sentimental in efficient ways. The broom remembers the lesson of the fish stones. Seldom push, mostly gather. You use the long stroke that starts at your shoulder and ends at your hip, the one that keeps your back cooperative. The broom glides, the pan welcomes, and the square grows emptier in the nicest sense of the word, emptier of clutter, fuller of quiet. Your ears adjust to the changed soundscape. Less clink, more hush, less selling, more settling. You cross to the shadow lying under the cloth hall eaves. Cool air pools there like water that forgot to be wet. The floor keeps the day's last flower sigh. 2 fingerprints of dye shadow the stone where a bolt brushed by ghost blue, almost polite. You sweep the flour into the pan and watch a moth discover the absence of drama in your work. It shivers once, announces boredom, and goes elsewhere to be a poem in someone else's window. At the pillar board, you find the remains of a rejected idea, a twist of paper, a knot of string, and a plan that did not survive the price. You slide them into the pan and keep the ribbon straight so the notes rest like well-fed pigeons. The ribbon's knot holds. You touch it anyway. Your habits enjoy rehearsing their competence. Every few strides you test the broom's bristles with your thumb. They answer with a mild scratch of things doing their job. A few straws try to retire early. You tuck them back under the binding with the firm kindness of a foreman who has learned diplomacy from winter. You think about fetching the spare broom from the clerk's room and decline. This one has opinions left to express, and you prefer continuity in tools, the way you prefer continuity in streets. You tilt the pan and watch the collection settle like small, reasonable weather. The day shrinks to crumbs and cleverness. A wafer of onion skin lays itself over a barley hull and calls it shelter. A shred of twine laces through like a road. The whole mess looks briefly like a town seen from the bell tower, which is the closest you intend to get to symbolism tonight. You pour the miniature city into the barrel and close the lid before it thinks of metaphors. Wind moves through the arcade with the soft authority of an old ant. It lifts the fringe on your sleeve and offers to carry a shred of leaf. You let it. Partnership is more efficient than pride. A door thunks in the middle distance. Tidy as a period. Somewhere, a laugh edits itself down to a sigh. Your broom continues its paragraph until the square's surface reads like clean prose. In front of the north gate, you kneel and look at the hinge plate, where grit likes to hide. You brush lightly so as not to teach the grit to be stubborn. A line of fine dust obeys, the color of comfortable boots. You flick it into the pan and promise the hinge a droplet of oil after the shutter round. Hinges listen. They have long memories and short patience. You prefer to be on good terms with both. The last broad sweep starts at the west end and walks the width of the Markt toward the canal. A single even sentence. The broom whispers, The pan nods. Your boots slide just enough to remember they are leather. You pause to rub a toe against the stone and take the shine down where a porter might hurry at dawn. A pinch of sand from the small sack turns proud stone into sensible stone. The square accepts modesty. When you finish, you stand the broom upright, bristles resting like a tired horse's shoulder against your leg. You look across what is no longer debris but absence, and the absence is pleasant. You knock the broom twice against the pan's rim to tell it the heavy part is over. The sound is hollow and homelike. You lean the broom in its nook by the pillar, mouth of the pan open to catch whatever last-minute confession the night might offer. It probably will not. You have been thorough without being severe. Your hands carry the chalk's pale dust and the broom's faint itch. You clap them softly and let the powder drift. It settles on your cuffs, makes you look wiser than usual, and then forgets you. You take one last step around the square to see if any peel has ambitions. None do. The market has accepted bedtime. You approve, which is both your job and your hobby. You set the pan where morning can find it, and roll your shoulders with the economy of someone promising them more sweeping tomorrow, but not now. You come to the lamp board with the efficiency of someone who has negotiated with small fires often enough to call it a friendship. The board is a stout plank with iron hooks along its top edge, a row of horns and glass faces turned inward like mild gossipers. Beneath it, the tools wait. The wick, shears with their tidy box to catch char, the snuffer like a little bell on a stem, the oil ladle with its lip shaped for obedience, the rag that has argued with soot and usually won. The smell is the square's night perfume oil that remembered it was once a fish, a little heat trapped in metal, the thin sweetness of horn when it is pleased with itself. You lift the first lantern and the ring at its crown answers with a tired clink. Its panes are horn shaved thin enough to learn humility. They glow faintly with whatever light the evening has left. You ease open the door and let the day's last breath in. The wick shows its blunt head, a black comma that believes it did its duty and therefore deserves elevation. The shears arrive without drama. You snip once, the box swallows the ash, and the wick stands newly sensible. You give it a gentle fray with your thumb so the edge will not sulk. A lamp, like a person, prefers to be invited to good behavior rather than shoved into it. Oil next. The little jar sits in the shadow of the board, warm where wood kept it from feeling poor. You dip the ladle and lift it slow so the surface does not become philosophical and attempt to rise in your sleeve. The lantern's well takes what you give one ladle, then half, then a patient pause to see whether presumption has crept in. You keep the level just shy of greed. Full lanterns boast and then spit. You prefer modest light that has nothing to prove. You strike tinder and nurse a flame under the wick's trimmed lip. The fire considers, remembers you, and agrees. It blossoms no higher than your instruction. You lower the snuffer over it for 1, 2, 3 calm heartbeats, your reminder about smoke. When you lift the bell, the flame sits low and clean, the color of butter that has decided to be clever. The horn takes the shine and softens it. You close the door. The lantern's ring warms in your hand. It has been reminded how to be useful. The evening appreciates such lessons. Down the row you go, lantern by lantern, small sermon by small sermon. A pane fogs where your breath touched it. You polish a faint circle with the rag until the world looks modestly clearer. Another wick has burned into a point like a stubborn finger. You trim the finger into a rounded statement. A third has begun to lean, courting mischief. You straighten it with the tiny brass pick you keep for domesticated defiance. The tools remember their tasks the instant your hand closes around them. They are your quietest colleagues. The tall lamp for the west doors waits at the end like a senior clerk, cultivating opinions. It is the one that prefers smoke to light, a personality flaw you have chosen to address with consistency rather than contempt. You open its little door, note the black richness where the wick's ambition has outpaced judgment, and trim until manners return. Oil to the proper line, snuffer down, longer this time, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then lifted with the same patience you use on bolts that want to discuss policy. The flame answers, chastened, clear at the edges. You let the door close and keep your hand there a moment, the way you might rest a palm on a horse's neck to say, you can and you will. The lamp consents to be good. You settle each lantern onto the board in its place, so the order of lifting will match the order of the square. First the north arcade, then the cloth hall's flanking posts, Then the little clerk's corner, where figures prefer not to squint. Outside, the evening has laced itself with a finer thread of blue. The belfry's tone drifts down, not announcing anything in particular, only remembering its purpose. You hook 2 lanterns on your fingers and one on the crook of your elbow and walk into the hush, careful not to teach the flames about sudden motion. At the first pillar, the bracket is exactly where it should be. You lift the lamp, seat the ring, and listen for the small iron approval, a shy click. The light opens into the arcade in a quiet puddle, not a blaze, a suggestion that edges exist and shins might want to remember them. The horn-pane throws a soft square against the opposite post. Your shadow nods and leaves you to it. You move on, deliver the second lamp to its bracket 2 pillars down, and watch the pockets of gentleness gather like neighbors attending a very considerate meeting. You return for the cloth hall pair. Their brackets sit high. You raise the lanterns as if offering the hall a sip of sense. Warm circles slide along the iron bands and come to rest on the latch, as if to complement your later intentions. The doors, being doors, accept attention without blushing. A moth appears, makes 3 tiny vows of devotion, and then remembers the intelligence of darkness. You approve its taste. Next, the clerk's corner, where ledger, sandshaker, and the rent box conspire to keep numbers unadventurous. You hang the lamp so that its light lays even across the table without interrogating the ink. Too much light breeds scandal. Enough light breeds accuracy. You cup your hand and check the wick's breath steady, almost inaudible. The flame is doing what you asked, declaring without boasting. You carry the last 2 lanterns to the canal-facing posts, where drafts like to practice their craft. Here you set the flames a shade lower. Wind enjoys making examples of the proud. The horn-panes mutter a little under the touch of moving air and then settle. You run a finger along the frame to feel for a place that would like a drop of oil later. Found. A hinge that imagines itself a singer. You promise it a humbler voice tomorrow. Lantern set. You return to the board for the small end of lesson tidying that keeps tools patient. The shears get a wipe. The snuffer receives a breath and a rub to discourage soot from feeling permanent. The ladle sits lip up for the night, because that is how lips behave when they are done. You fold the rag and tuck it under the board's edge in the little pocket where it dreams of clean panes. A pinch of sand goes into your palm. You pat it under the west door's lamp to discourage the stone from remembering oil in the morning. The pinch makes a gentler truth out of the floor. You note the oil taken on the tablet with your private curl, then the public word on the ledger line. Lanterns trimmed, oil measured. You add a small point beside the west lamp's entry. A dot that means improved manners, a code of one that you alone will read in the morning and be faintly cheered by. You tip your head and listen. The square answers with the low conversation of distant steps and a shudder that would like to be done pretending it is a bird. The light you have hung says, with its modest circles, that nothing has been forgotten on purpose. You walk the row once more, just to be certain you have not imagined competence. Each flame sits in its house, awake enough, not hungry, not vain. Horn-panes shine like buttered paper. Iron rings test their patience and find it intact. If a lamp could close its eyes while remaining useful, this is how it would look. You stand in the middle of your work, as a cook might stand with bowls covered in dough resting, and you allow yourself the smallest, most professional contentment. Tonight the square will not sneeze at its own shadows. Your fingers smell of oil, warm metal, and the faint sweet of horn. You rub thumb to forefinger and feel the tack that tells you the rag earned its keep. The handbell waits by your ledger, preparing its modest opinion about rounds. Not yet. Lanterns first, then shutters, then doors, then bolts. The routine is sensible, and you are sensible with it. You turn once, catch the soft mirrored lights in the canal's dark, and let the picture pass through you without souvenir. The lamps behave. The night has learned its lines. You move on. You start at the north arcade because the posts there talk less and work more. The shutters wait in their slots like well-behaved oxen, heavy, patient, slightly proud of being necessary. You rest your palm against the first plank and feel yesterday's weather cooled inside the grain. The iron strap along its back tastes faintly of hands, oil, and the clean dust of sawed wood. You lift the bar from its bracket, not with flourish, but with that tidy caution that prevents stories. The bar leaves its cradle and remembers you by weight, not surprise. You set the bar down along the bench, a soft clank becoming a settled hush. The shutter now asks for 2 hands. You oblige. One hand at the edge where the notch fits the guiding post, the other slides under the crosspiece to take the weight that pretends to be more than it is. You raise the plank the width of 2 fingertips to unstick it from habit. It yields with a grain-deep sigh, the contented complaint of wood that remembers many evenings. Lowering is a conversation. You do not force, you suggest. The plank glides down the grooves that know its mind. Each inch a small agreement. The felt strip kisses stone. The lip finds the sill. The shutter sits. You smooth its face the way you would smooth a dog that has already decided to lie down. The latch tongue waits. You test it with a knuckle. It answers with a click that means tomorrow may begin exactly where tonight ends. You move to the next bay. The light has thinned to that good, thoughtful kind that makes edges honest and excuses dust. The second shutter prefers to hesitate. You step closer, speak in iron instead of words. A breath of oil on the pivot, a tap from the heel of your palm, where the strap meets stubbornness, a lift, no higher than politeness permits. The plank remembers itself and comes down behaving. You think good and say nothing. At the third bay, a wedge left by the basket seller keeps the shutter from landing square. You kneel, pocket the small culprit, and run your fingers along the sill to chase out grit. Your skin reports the profile. One tiny nail head, one crumb of mortar, a very short story of neglect. You remove both and give the stone a courtesy wipe with the hem of your sleeve. The shutter thanks you by settling as if it had always meant to. You keep the rhythm that keeps your shoulders honest. Lift, suggest, lower, latch, breathe, check, press, listen. Your keys lean against your hip and approve. Above you, the roof's thatch lays its quiet weight in clean lines, keeping the day's heat where it belongs. A moth tumbles into your orbit and then leaves again, apparently satisfied that you are not a lantern. Halfway along, you pause to listen to the arcade as a whole. Wood has a choir voice if you give it time. Tonight, it sings loyalty without ambition, the perfect hymn for a square that likes to sleep in one piece. You touch the nearest post with your knuckles and feel the hum of evening travel a finger's width into your hand. Good. You continue. A shutter near the corner has learned a bad habit from its neighbor. It drags its right edge and sulks. You address the hinge pin with a tender firmness, a half turn with your short wrench, and a drop of oil you keep in a bottle too small to attract attention. The hinge relents. You let the plank down and the sulk lifts. You could congratulate yourself. Instead, you replace the bottle and say, "There," only inside your head. At the last bay, you meet honest resistance. The groove is clean. The strap is true. The wood, however, remembers a damp week and shows it. You set your shoulder, not to shove, but to accompany. Together, you and the shutter decide on downward. It arrives at the sill and rests with a little victorious tremor that does not need to be mentioned. You mention it anyway by giving the latch a firmer tap. The tap becomes a period at the end of a paragraph the square has been writing all day. Now you walk back along the row with the softness of someone checking blankets in a sleeping room. Each shutter receives the same brief ritual, palm pressed flat, breath held a second, ear close to hear the latch's tiny sentence. You find 2 that want to touch more. You give it. You find one that feels perfect. You leave it alone, which is the deepest compliment. The north arcade holds itself closed like a book that knows its story. Your hands smell of pine pitch and iron. Your sleeves have learned a thin ribbon of dust at cuff and elbow. The floor under the bays looks tidier than it deserves, and therefore worth guarding. You draw a small line on your tablet, arcade shutters lowered, then add a dot in the margin next to the bay that enjoyed sulking. Tomorrow, you will bring a longer talk with oil, a cloth, and the patience that wears boots. You collect the bar from the bench and set it back on its pegs, where it will greet you in the morning with the blank simplicity of a well-made tool. You lift your handbell, think about a ring, think again about the cloth hall, and let the bell rest. The square has accepted one more layer of evening. It will accept another. You turn toward the hall doors, the largest of your nightly opinions, and walk with the weight that tells wood you are the person who expects cooperation and brings it in his pocket. Before you leave the arcade, you check the little crossbars that keep mischief from practicing under planks. Each peg slides into its socket with the quiet self-respect of a tool returning home. You squat, sight along the bottoms for a neat line, with no daylight, where daylight does not belong. A thin thread of draft finds your cheek and then loses its courage. You rub the spot with your thumb and feel only dry honesty. One splinter tries to become a story. You tame it with the back of your knife and promise a rub of oil tomorrow. You face the cloth hall as you would an ox you know by name, respectful of its size, sure of its habits, and calm about your own. Two high doors hold the evening like cupped hands oak, faced with iron, bands crossing like thoughtful ribs. From the dim inside comes the market's daytime breath, now quiet, dry linen, mild soap, a shy ghost of dye that has put away its opinion. You set both palms on the nearest strap and let the metal give up its temperature. Iron keeps a record. Tonight it reads cool and content. First, the crossbars. The lower bar leans in its cradle, pretending to be heavier than it is. You lift it from the brackets with an easy underhand, feel the balance find your grip, and walk it to the pegs by the jamb. It settles there with a decorous hush. The up per bar wishes to debate the last inch. You concede nothing except patience. A small lift, a thoughtful tilt, and the bar agrees to rest like its brother. Iron announces itself in well-bred syllables when you ask it properly. Inside, the hall keeps an after-supper hush. Benches wait with folded cloth, like sleepers tucked to the chin. One bale lies roped and labeled in a cheerful hand that enjoys loops. Dust motes hang like pale seeds, deciding nothing in particular. You stroll the length where the measuring board lives, fingers brushing the iron-bound rule set into the edge, hearing each nailhead answer present, present, present. You are not inspecting, you are greeting. The building has learned that difference and likes you for it. You lean to the threshold and check the sill for grit that would teach the door to sulk. A whisk with the hem of your jerkin, a stroke with the back of your thumb along the groove, and the oak answers with that pleasant, friction-soft sigh that means tomorrow will be civil. Your ear keeps half an eye on the roof timbers. No tick of cooling too eager. No mouse with theatrical feet. Only the slow exhale of stored warmth. The hall is a great chest that has finished telling its story. You are merely the listener who closes the lid. Now the hinges. You test each the way you test a friend's temper, with a touch that invites truth. The top hinge on the right door enjoys opinions. It always has. You let one drop of oil travel the pin, then rock the leaf a hair so the kindness can think. The tiny metal talk that follows is agreeable and short. The lower hinge, decent as bread, accepts a smaller attention and keeps quiet about it. You admire a hinge that does not require applause. You draw the right door inward a span to free its weight, palm set on the brass stud, where iron meets oak. The door rolls along its thought, steady and unsurprised, as a practiced sentence finds its period. When the edge meets the rebate, the whole hall seems to take a comfortable seat. You do not slam. Slamming is for people who lack patience and doors that lack character. Your doors possess both patience and character, so your hand lingers a breath, letting the wood remember it was built to behave. Before you secure the latch, you let the inside air slide out. It passes your face with clean threads of scent. Lye, yarn, the warm hush of cloth that held sun all day and now prefers moon. A blue thread clings to the jamb. You pinch it away and pocket it to prevent the morning from finding a snag and staging a small tragedy. Editing now, gently, costs nothing. You lower the latch tongue into its keeper with 2 fingers and a mind like a level. Iron settles, finds its appointed comfort, and answers with the satisfying click the square would call a good night. You follow with the lower bar, lifting from the pegs, setting one end, then walking the length with your shoulder, under its weight no strain, only confirmation. The bar drops into its home with a tone that belongs in a polite bell, not a boast. Oak, iron, and habit shake hands where no one sees. You cross to the left door and repeat the sermon. This hinge is modest. The strap shows the faintest upward curl, where a wagon's bump taught humility last winter. You smooth it with your thumb as if stroking a nervous animal, whispering the only doctrine you preach. Easy down, easy in, easy home. Doctrines are best when they fit on one breath. The leaf swings, meets its fellow with the hush of cloth folding on cloth, and together they remember they are a wall. You test the lock with the heart-bowed key. Its weight sits in your palm like a well-fed bird. You feed it to the key plate, and turn with the tempo you learned from snow. Slow enough to persuade, firm enough to decide. Teeth meet wards with tiny private celebrations. The bolt travels, finds its bed, and lies down as if it had never done anything else. Withdrawing, you feel the farewell nudge of the last ward, and hang the key where it can listen to your hip. A moth that mistook the hall for a moon drifts past your eyebrow and relocates to a more philosophical lantern in the arcade. You set your ear to the seam between doors and hear the sound you hire for. Almost nothing. A trace of draft at the top. Honest, harmless. You seat a small leather wedge in the corner to tell the world you are particular without being severe. Severe people make bad neighbors for doors. As a final attention, you take a pinch of sand and scrub it lightly under your sole, where the threshold is smoother than dignity prefers. The grit seats, the shine dims to a civil dull. The stone promises not to write comedy under a porter's boot at dawn. You pat the place with your toe. The hall agrees to sleep. You step back to see the hole. Straps glimmering, latch quiet, bars convinced, key content. In the little green the canal throws along the stone, you look like someone whose craft is ending sentences correctly. You can live with that. You make your note on the tablet cloth, hall closed, hinges oiled, bars set, and your chalk leaves a line that looks, for once, like a smile standing upright. Then you breathe the kind of breath that tells your shoulders you have moved a large thing with small manners. And you turn toward the side gates with the easy authority of a person who prefers cooperation to force. You visit the weighing table the way a baker visits dough palm ready, breath steady, expecting honesty in increments. The balances rest like seesaws that have decided to be sensible. Their tongue-shaped pointers sit level, quiet as taught cats. Along the back rail, the stamped stones wait in their tidy procession. Great pounders with brass plugs, middling halves etched with gild lilies, quarters, eighths, and the tiny slivers that pretend they have no weight at all until they do. You lay your ledger aside and give the beam a polite nudge. The knife edge answers with the faintest tick, the sound of arithmetic clearing its throat. Good. You lift the first stone with 2 fingers curled under its bevel. It is heavy in the decent weight that keeps promises. The mark is familiar, a crowned letter that means somebody once checked, someone sober in a room with fewer drafts than this one, and decided that truth should carry a symbol. You set the stone upon the pan and let the other side rise. Slow, considerate. The pointer moves like a clerk walking with a book on his head. You wait until it settles exactly between the little dots you painted last winter, dots placed for eyes that tire at dusk. Balance agrees with balance. You remove the stone and dust its seat with the back of your glove. The dust smells faintly of rye and metal, as if bread and bells exchanged politeness. Next comes the half. You test it the same and watch the beam confess its judgment. Then the quarter, then the eighth, then the sly slip that makes a grocer honest. Each receives the same sermon. Down, up, breathe, still. You do not hurry because the measure does not hurry. Fairness likes be courted, not chased. A customer's scoop, forgotten by the ledger nook, sits nearby like a witness wants to speak. You bring it over, set the smallest stone against it, and find the scoop insisting on generosity by a fingertip. You pinch a shaving from the scoop's lip with your knife, a paper's width no more, and smooth the edge with a scrap of wax. Back on the pan, the pointer approves by pretending nothing has happened. Improvement is best when modest. You stack the tested stones in pairs to carry them, enjoying the dull thuds as they settle into one another's company. The coffer waits open, iron straps yawning like a bored dog that still means to guard. Inside, the compartments are separated by low oak ribs, worn shiny by years of responsible arrivals. You place the heavy stones first, 2 to a cell, then the halves, then the quarters. You let the little fellows ride together in a corner where their bickering will be contained by wood. Between each placement you count softly. 1 pair, 2 pair, 3, 1/2, 2/2. Quarters by 4s until the number pleases the page that lives in your skull. You close your eyes and see the pattern. The whole row rising, the middlings answering. the small lot-like beads on a cord. When you open them, the coffer shows exactly that picture, which is a comfort you pretend not to notice. You test the spare beam that hangs beneath the table, for the evening sometimes invents mischief. The hinge screw turns a thought too freely. You snug it, bring the pointer to the line, and let the scale consider its civic duty. The pointer nods. The beam remembers it is an instrument, not a neighbor with opinions. You return it to its hook and whisper a promise of oil in the morning, because tools remember kindness better than people do. A stray lead pellet no stamp, no plug rolls from under the board and announces itself with guilt. You pick it up and weigh it in the palm, then give it the probation of the small pan. It fails by a margin you can feel more than see. Into the drawer it goes, a future fishing sinker or moral example. The stamped family is a closed guild. Membership requires ceremony. You close the coffer lid and let its iron hasp meet the staple. The padlock takes your key with an appetite that has been trained. You turn, feel the shackle seat, and withdraw, leaving the coffer squarely in its corner like a citizen who knows its address. The table, relieved of complication, looks plainer and therefore more dignified. You wipe the beam's knife edge with one clean stroke, the way you smooth a cowlick on a sleepy child, then step back to listen. Silence offers its approval by continuing. The square outside breathes under the lanterns you set, and the faintest ring from the cloth hall strap travels through the stone into your shoes. You write 2 words on your tablet, "Weights settled," and add a dot that means you heard the hinge thinking and will bring oil. The routine stretches its back and becomes easier again. The balances stand at attention without saluting. The stones sleep with their names intact. You pick up the ledger, close it to a restful pause, and move on. 2 men arrive at the weighing table like shadows that remembered their voices. One carries a scoop, one carries a grievance. You do not ask for names. Everyone has a name, and tonight you prefer objects. The scoop, tin with a lip polished by grain. The grievance, thin as string and twice as likely to knot. They set their belongings down, then their opinions. You listen first with your hands. You draw the beam forward, calm as a bench. The pointer points to nobody. The man with the scoop says his oats were short by a whisper. The man with the measure says his wooden quart has never lied. You nod, as if the statement were a blanket you are tucking around 2 restless children. You ask for the quart. It comes, square-shouldered, its rim shining with the day's honest rub. You rinse it with a dipper at the pump, because water argues less than mouths. You set it upside down to drain, then right it with one firm tap that tells wood to be accurate. The scoop, for fairness, gets the same small bath. You lay a clean cloth on the pan, because fairness enjoys ceremony, however small. You place the stamped poundstone upon its seat. The beam thinks, then sits. You fill the quart with oats from the common sack you keep for such negotiations. Level the grain with a straight edge, no heaping, no hollow. You empty the quart into the pan. The beam dips and rises, polite as a bow between neighbors who share a fence. The man with the scoop begins a sentence with "always," which is how unhelpful sentences like to begin. You hold up a finger, not to scold, but to pause his history. You return the quart to the line, fill again, level again, pour again. The beam repeats its calm answer. You add the half-stone. The pointer steadies on the mark you painted for evenings just like this. You remove the half, then the quarter, watching the beam confess, then at last approve. Every movement is slow enough that nobody's pride gets ideas. You turn to the scoop. Tin differs from wood. It remembers dents. You run your thumb along the lip and feel a crescent lowered by use. Not a scandal, only a habit. You show the place to both men, as if you were pointing out a scratch on a well-traveled door. Then you fold a scrap of paper and seat it under the lip. A shim no thicker than patience. You fill, you level, you pour. The beam nods. The men's shoulders drop the width of one worry. You ask the measure man to bring his quart tomorrow for the scribe to mark again, because labels age like people do. He agrees with the relief of someone told he is still honest, merely due for polish. You ask the scooper to keep the paper shim and to consider a repair. He says, "I will," in the tone most people use when they mean, "if I remember." You forgive him in advance. It costs nothing and saves noise. Coins change hands, not many. You take none. This is not a fee, but a bedtime story told to a table that enjoys being right. You write a small note on your tablet, court remarked, scoop shimmed, and make the curl that means nothing urgent remains. The beam returns to its quiet posture. The pointer, finally off duty, stares at the middle like a cat that has decided to stay put. The men thank you without making the mistake of gratitude. They lift their tools and take their opinions away with them, lighter by 2 spoonfuls of drama. You wipe the pan, close the coffer, and put the straight edge back where it leans like common sense. You feel the pleasure that comes from work which ends with everyone still neighbors. Before you leave, you place the shim's twin under the board in case paper decides to travel. You smooth the cloth with the palm of your hand, savoring the soft rasp that says nothing sticky remains. You hang the dipper, shake the water from your wrist, and let the pump swallow the last drips. The square listens and approves the way squares do, by not changing anything essential. You stand a moment with your hands at rest, letting the air move past your sleeves. Somewhere a lantern ticks. The small metal contraction that means warmth is on speaking terms with night. Your keys weigh the same. Your shoulders weigh less. You look at the beam one last time. It looks back with the simple face of an instrument that would prefer not to be a topic. You agree. You step away, and the table returns to being furniture instead of theater. The pillar board waits like a polite ear, wood polished by fingers that prefer to speak softly. You come to it with 2 tasks and no hurry. Read what the day pinned, and give tomorrow a tidy place to start. The ribbon is tight red once, now the color of old berries. It holds notes that meant to matter. You straighten the bow because bows, like hinges, behave better when properly noticed. At the top sits a neatly folded request. Stall, exchange for Friday and Saturday cordage offered, sober lad to assist. The letters lean forward, eager to be reasonable. You lift the pin, slide the paper free, and open it along the living crease so it will not crack. Names, pitch numbers, hours that pretend to be precise good enough. You fold it kinder, write a small summary for the scribe, and slide both into your ledger like 2 birds that travel better together. Below that, a complaint has attempted poetry. Southgate sticks like a tired mule. You admire the simile and forgive the ink for hurrying. You smooth the ripple, the weather raised. Then prick a discreet dot on your tablet to say, top hinge, lower latch, sill grit. Complaints are most useful when they become errands. A third slip is a promise disguised as news. Fresh eels tomorrow, second net mended. You smile with one corner, the professional limit of enthusiasm. You move the note 1 finger lower, so dawn eyes meet it without climbing. The cats will claim they never read it. Pinned sideways comes the tinker's message, creased like a map, pans edged clean, shears sharpened on Tuesday. You flatten it on your palm and put it back straighter than it arrived. A pencil tick joins the tiny calendar you keep behind your eyes. Beside, buy more sand. 3 narrow slips list lost things, a blue ribbon, a bone button, and an opinion about barley prices. The last is unsigned, perhaps wisely. You tuck ribbon and button into the basket marked, when found. Tilt the basket so the night cannot recruit its contents into stories, and leave the opinion pinned where it can practice being harmless. Behind the board, in the shy corner where gossip tries to become wisdom, a curled scrap whispers, watchman late. You fold it once more, so the words hide, and slide it under the ribbon with the others, equal in their smallness. Your work is tidiness, not discipline. A merchant's handbill has tried to grow with flourishes. Flanders linens, whitened thrice, priced to favor neighborly souls. You trim the width so it does not bully its neighbors, then pin it with 1 corner turned for tomorrow's thumb. The board is not a fairground. It is a hallway table for passing cents. You check each pin with your forefinger just enough to ask, are you tired? One answers yes by sliding. You press it deeper, turn the head with a grain, and feel the wood agree to hold. The ribbon's knot has loosened half a breath. You retie it not tighter, simply better. Tight breeds drama, better breeds sleep. The bow sits even, polite as a cap indoors. From your pocket, you bring a roll of clean, narrow paper. You cut 3 blanks and set them in the clay dish so late thoughts have a place to land. A stub of charcoal goes beside them for hands that arrive inkless. The dish, the stubs, The blank slips together, they look like a promise you intend to keep. You write one calm notice of your own, as you do most nights. Shutters lowered, cloth haul fast, weights settled, sand at fish stones, lanterns trimmed. You sign with the initial the board recognizes and no one else does. The message is not for reading so much as remembering. The square sleeps easier when it knows what it already knows. Before you step back, you wipe the board with your sleeve just enough to chase the day's breath and let the grain show. You take the basket of found things from its peg and inventory without theater. 2 buttons, a child's ribbon, a spoon that wishes to belong elsewhere, 3 pins that bent under unrealistic ambitions. You place them in the drawer by the clerk's corner, where morning hands will stage reunions without speeches. Finally, you lean close and listen to the silence behind the notes. There is always a little noise there, plans not yet true, worries smaller than they feel. Tonight, the noise is tidy. You accept the compliment on behalf of pins, ribbon, and wood. Let your breathing match the board's patience, and nod to the pillar like a neighbor with a lamp. Then you move toward your bell, carrying the comfortable knowledge that tomorrow now has somewhere to begin. You pick up the handbell, as if lifting a polite sentence by its first letter. Brass gives your palm a patient cool. The clapper rests like a thought not yet spoken. The square waits, already more evening than day. You weigh the bell once, then twice. Your pattern is the same always. 3 soft rings for notice, a pause, 2 for assent, 1 for courtesy. You are not summoning, you are acknowledging. The first ring reaches the nearest pillar. The second joins it. The third touches the cloth haul and becomes something the wood understands. You keep your wrist loose, so sound arrives round and civil. The clapper kisses brass and returns without regret. Cats lift their heads, finding no new rule. They resume impartiality. A boy at the far bench returns a coil of cord to its place, trying to look as if he meant to do it anyway. He did not, and the bell forgives him. You wait one steady breath. In the pause, shutters decide. A curtain drops its last inch. Someone ties the knot they kept meaning to tie. You give 2 soft rings, like a string drawn through an eyelet. The square exhales, voices thin, without being scolded. A cart chooses to quit, while it still has dignity. The final single note is not an ending, but a reminder that endings exist. You let it fall, as gentle as a hand smoothing a sleeve. It sits on the rent box table, tidy as a coin. The canal answers with the faintest syllable. Above, the belfry thinks about curfew and thinks a little longer. Your bell comes before decisions. People do what they always do after the bell. The brewer's boy gathers his buckets and departs. The herb woman ties one last knot and pats it. The cooper salutes with 2 fingers that mean agreement. Agreement makes locks easier and dreams less crowded. You walk a small circle as the sound thins, not to supervise, but to keep it company while it spends itself. The air holds a faint brass taste. Your wrist remembers arcs and distances. You do not shake out your hand. The bell hangs again at your side. More punctuation than instrument. At the canal arch, 2 watchmen appear, conveniently timed. Their halberds behave like broom handles until provoked. You trade the little tally your wooden chit for their round, and exchange remarks that could be recorded as weather. Clear, mild, yes. They will walk long streets while you finish short ones. The bell introduced you without insisting on friendship. A shutter that hesitated earlier admits defeat. You touch the latch, give it a 4 fingers encouragement, and hear the click that means tomorrow will not argue. A moth uses your sleeve to admire a lantern. Details fall into place the way crumbs fall toward a plate. You lift the bell once more for the arcade's far end, where sound arrives late and takes offense if ignored. 3, 2, 1. All softer than honesty, and the stones answer with a small hum under your boots. The pillar board receives no new notes during ringing. Even opinions recognize that punctuation deserves the floor. When you lower the bell for the last time, you feel the pleasant fatigue of a tool that has done what was asked. You brush its rim with your thumb and watch the breath print vanish. You hang it on the peg by the ledger, where it becomes again an object among objects, useful and patient. A child appears, discovers that whispering makes every word important, and practices saying goodnight as if you were a door. You allow the promotion and accept the title with a nod. The child goes home having told the market what to do. The market, amused, obeys everyone by obeying the bell. You count 10 slow steps and hear the sounds you hope to hear. Cloth on wood, cord pulled snug, a horse's yawn, the little speech of sand under a careful boot. The bell has done enough. The rest belongs to hinges, keys, and the kind of order you deliver by walking where you have always walked. On the bench by the pump, the bell leaves a faint circle of quiet, as if sound could set down a footprint. You touch the bench once, out of habit more than reason, and the wood keeps its counsel. In the distance, a door answers a latch, then goes thoughtful. Night takes the hint. Your keys settle against your hip like coins choosing stillness over opinion for now. You lift your tablet, make one-line bell given, and add the dot that says the watch has been met. The chalk leaves a white calm. You breathe, the square breathes, and together you proceed without flourish into the next simple act. You turn toward the Markt's brazier, as if toward a sleepy dog that still holds a spark. It squats on 3 feet beneath the arcade, a shallow iron bowl with a rim polished by years of use. The day has fed it splinters, peelings, and a modest philosophy of warmth. Now it keeps a red murmur, charcoal thinking its way toward dark. You would prefer it not finish the thought without you. The poker waits where you left it, leaning like a staff that declines romance. You lift it and feel the handle's smoothness tell the story of knuckles that never asked for applause. A light tap on the bowl announces manners. The iron gives back a hollow note. You stir with the steady wrist that belongs to long evenings. The top ash breaks like dry bread, pale crust giving way to embers that still remember noon. Heat lifts against your cheekbones, polite and insistent. You draw the embers inward as a beekeeper draws bees, unhurried, knowing that haste teaches edges. Where a coal flares, you breathe once, then move on. From the bucket by the pillar, the ash scoop offers itself like a ladle. You test the ash with 2 fingers. It has the fine cool of sifted flour at the rim, warmer below. You begin the covering as you would make a bed, corners first. A quiet drift slides over the brightest coals, and the light dims to a thoughtful blush. Another spoon, and the murmur becomes a hum. The ash says, "Rest," and the charcoal agrees. You work the circle slowly, steady as a clock that refuses drama. Each spoon earns a pause while you listen with your skin. If heat pushes back, you lift the ash and try a different angle. If it sighs and settles, you proceed. A scrap of twig tries to lift its head. You press it down with the spoon's back. The air around your hands cools by a degree you trust without a number. The rim shows 3 notches, where careless tongs argued with iron. You run your thumb across them, not to scold, simply to remember the bowl believes in history. A flake of scale detaches and lands among the gray. You bury it. Let tomorrow polish what tomorrow owns. You smother the last stubborn red near the windward side. A draft has teased that corner, trying to teach sparks ambition. The ash muffles the lecture. You angle the iron shield 2 hinged plates with a handle as a windbreak, and set it a hand's breadth from the bowl. It makes a shallow pocket of calm. Sparks, deprived of theater, decide to be dust. The smell changes. Less sweet, more mineral. A quiet version of stone warmed by sun. Your eyes water once and then clear. You rake the grate so tomorrow's first breath will find easy passages. What remains above is a low, even landscape of gray, interrupted by modest hills where embers sleep. You level them gently with the spoon, not flat. Flat is for scolds just calm. You set the poker aside with its tip on a brick. Now, the lid, an iron disc with a ring, heavy enough to persuade, light enough to obey. You lower it the way one lowers a good argument centered, steady, without gloat. The ring settles, and the bowl becomes a closed thought. A faint whisper continues beneath, like a reader turning pages. You leave a thumb's width gap on the leeward side, a kindness that lets breath linger and prevents sulks. You wipe your palms on your jerkin and feel the heat already climbing down from your skin. On the stone before the brazier, you scatter a measured pinch of sand, learned by many winters, to hush any oily memory from past suppers. Your boot tests the spot and finds it honest. You check the nearby post and the thatch edge above for impertinent warmth. Knuckles tap wood, nose tests air, eyes red shadow. Nothing but decent cool. You nudge the shield for the wind that will probably forget itself after curfew. Your work answers without voice. On the tablet, you write 3 modest words, embers covered ash. Then add a dot for the shield and a second for the grate. The chalk takes them without ceremony. Your hands smell faintly of iron and old smoke. You set the scoop back into the bucket with its mouth up. A small open silence. The poker leans in its corner, content, a companion who knows the value of ending a conversation before it becomes interesting. You watch the lid be a lid. It does its one task and desires no witness. You reward it with exactly that, none. Then you turn toward the gates with wrists cool, eyes pleased, and a square that has slightly less to think about. Now, you tilt your head back and let duty live in your neck. The arcade's timber posts rise into dusk like patient mastheads, their ends square where they meet the thatch. You have checked them most evenings of your life, not because you distrust wood, but because you trust habit more. You touch the nearest post with your knuckles. It answers with the cool hush of a tree that has agreed to become furniture. You prefer quiet posts to noisy ideas. The square likes you like this. You read the beams plain and slow, satisfied when nothing dramatic appears. Scarf joints sit tight, wedges tucked like folded tongues. Pegs show round and honest. Where a carpenter's mark once scratched a letter, soot has settled as thin as old ink. You rub it with your thumb and see only age behaving itself. Smell speaks first. You lift your chin and take a long, quiet draught, the way you would taste broth. Cool straw, dry rope, faint tar. No sweet sharpness that would tell you a spark learned bad manners. The air keeps its even temper, and you continue. At the eave, you test the thatch edge with 2 fingers, pinching and releasing. The reed springs back, not brittle, not damp. You slide your hand along the drip line and find a few grains of grit where a day's wind parked its opinions. Into your pocket go the grains, a small tax against future quarrels. You chase one reed end that wants to misbehave and tuck it beneath its neighbor. You step from bay to bay, becoming a metronome for good sense. At each post you give the same little sermon. Knuckle, ear, nose, eye. The knuckle listens for hollow mutiny. The ear attends for beetle. The nose sorts straw from the gossip of smoke. The eye follows shadow for the thin sharp that means scorch. Tonight the congregation is pious. A ladder, stabled under the eaves, gets its turn. You lay your palm along the stiles and feel the faint glass of wear where shoulders have carried it. One rung creaks. You press your thumb to the notch, and the board remembers its dignity. You shift the ladder 2 hands sideways, so tomorrow's reach will begin on steadier ground. You lift the thatch skirt and look for impertinent daylight. None. Only the clean line where reed ends drink the cool. You kneel at a post base and consider the joint where wood meets stone. Sand has done its job. The sill shows honest wear. You run the bristle end of your pocket brush into the gap, tease out a thread of husk and a dead moth. Across the square, you angle yourself to see the beam ends under the cloth hall eaves. Pigeons run a private city there. Tonight their embassy is closed. No droppings on the strap faces. You scrape one white signature from a bolt head, not for neatness alone, but because acids prefer iron. The scrape ticks once, finished. You visit the West Arcade, where drafts like to persuade sparks to have opinions. Your lantern burns low and even. You hold your hand above the light. Warm, contained, the bracket's pin squeaks when tested. You promise it oil and mark a dot. Last autumn a brazier lid sulked and a straw curl tried mischief. You answered with a damp cloth and 3 patient breaths. You have no wish to repeat the scene. You pat the nearest post, as if thanking an old mule for not inventing adventure. At the north corner, a cartwheel once rubbed a beam until the wood learned a new curve. You run your palm along that scar the way a groom follows a wither. Smooth, hard, sealed with pitch, you check the iron shoe on the corner stone where wheels confess. Scar upon scar, yes, but all of them history. None of them tonight. You finish by standing in the center and letting the rafters draw themselves together above you. A wide rib cage breathing without hurry. You listen with your shoulders. Nothing wants a bucket. Nothing wants a shout. Nothing, blessedly, wants to be interesting. Still, you add a last kindness. From your pouch, you take a twist of linen dipped in water and vinegar. You wipe the bracket face nearest the west lamp, removing a film of soot. The cloth blackens just enough to justify itself. You fold it and stow it away, pleased by small, dull victories. You note 3 things on your tablet: pins, oil, bracket, wipe, eave grit removed, and draw the curl that means peaceable. The roof returns your glance with the expression all roofs should wear at night. Unremarkable. On you go, content that wood will remain wood and straw will remain shy, until morning asks them to be brave again. You turn to the side gates the way you turn a page you know by heart, not for surprise, but for completion. The canal breathes along the stone, cool and damp. Your keys settle into your palm. The square-bowed one minds the canal gate. The longer fellow keeps the south. You let them remember their duties in your hand before you ask anything of iron. The canal gate stands in a small arch that pretends to be sterner than it is. You test the wood with your knuckles sound, no hollow. Yesterday's weather asleep in the grain. The latch lifts without theater. You slip the square-bowed key into the plate and feel the wards greet its teeth like neighbors at dusk. Turn slow, firm. The bolt draws with a tidy scrape, a music you will not name. You open the gate a hand's breadth to look at the sill. A sliver of reed has appointed itself an obstacle. 2 fingers end its career. You brush the stone with your jerkin cuff, then set the gate home, and hear, more than feel, the leaf sits square. You throw the inner bolt. It runs true. You push twice, not hard, only enough to let the wood learn that night is an answer. The iron replies with the respectful clack of promises kept. You listen the best test. Water shifts. A ring on a post tinks as a rope settles. Your gate says nothing. Correct. You mark a dot on your tablet canal gate fast, and draw the curl you reserve for places that want a pinch of sand before dew. You scatter that pinch now, dulling where boots will pass early. The south gate is the note from the board given shape. It keeps a narrow alley where drafts like to think. You run your palm along the stile and feel a faint roughness near the hinge strap, the place that sticks like a tired mule. You choose the long key. The wards accept with the little bump you expected. Turn, withdraw, and the latch comes free with a sigh that remembers last winter. You open the gate and look the trouble in the mouth. The top hinge pin shows a dusting of grit where wind has delivered opinions. From your pocket comes the small oiled rag, folded like a secret. You wipe the pin, gather the grit, and show the hinge a single drop from the tiny bottle. Not much, just enough for manners. You rock the leaf in and out the width of a knuckle, letting the oil decide. The squeak becomes a thought, then goes. On the sill, a sprinkle of sand has turned itself to paste. You fetch the hook twig and draw the paste from the rebate. A breath of water from the dipper, a dry wipe with your sleeve, and the stone is again plain, which is the ideal state of stones. You try the swing once more. The gate folds and returns without invention. You set the long bolt. It glides home with the gentle shove of iron that knows its bed. The lower chute receives the same attention and answers with a thud you approve. You push twice 2 brief, even statements. The wood gives a low yes. You place your ear near the head gap and listen for draft. A trace, but friendly. You seat the small leather wedge you carry, and the trace becomes memory. You give the plate a light tap with your knuckle, a habit that tells you more than sight. Sound returns correct, neither sulk nor rattle. You rub your thumb across the keyhole and feel no burr to catch a cloak string at dawn. The gate has remembered its job, helped by your small sermon. You write a neat line, South Gate, soothed on the tablet, and add the dot that means oil to reason. You return to the canal arch to test once more. Fingers on wood, heel against stone, a measured press. Nothing moves that shouldn't. A barge knocks far off. The belfry considers curfew and declines to speak for another breath. You tuck the keys to your belt, and they ride your hip like contented tools. Crossing back, you take the path a porter will take in the morning. Heel, toe, the grain of the square underfoot. No treachery waits where the gates might have taught it. You nod to the space itself, which is as close as you come to pride. Gates fast, bolts honest, hinges improved. You make your last mark for this round. Shut the tablet, and let the night hold its edge a little steadier because you were here to push twice, where it mattered and nowhere more. You start the outer circle the way a tailor checks hems. One steady circuit, no argument, hands ready to touch what needs touching. The square has thinned to outlines and intentions. Your lanterns keep modest puddles. Between them, the stones wear an even dimness that makes footsteps polite. Above, the belfry leans its long ear over the Markt. You follow its shadow, a tall companion that walks without needing shoes. Past the fish stones, forgetting their salt. Past the pillar board's orderly whisper. Past the cloth hall. It straps the color of sleeping iron. The first bell arrives like a measured yawn. Not curfew yet, only the throat clearing that tells roofs to put thoughts away. The note swells into rafters and lowers along the walls, until it rests on your shoulders. You let it settle and move on. At the north corner, you check the alley mouth that always believes it is a story. Nothing, only a broom, lean of shadow and the faintest soap from a basin behind a shutter. Your hand skims the cornerstone, cool, plain, committed to being stone. You count drain covers as you go, a quiet arithmetic that persuades feet to behave. 1 by the pump, 2 near the tinker's pitch, 3 toward the canal, each in place, sitting square. A toe nudges the third. It answers with the dull, loyal note of iron that has no intention of traveling. You praise it by not lifting it. The second bell comes rounder, like a loaf that rose properly. Pigeons adjust their sleep. A window latches with the smallest click that still counts as a decision. Your route bends by the canal arch, where water trades your lanterns for a narrow ribbon. You rest a palm on the gate you soothed, and feel it tell you nothing. Good gates are dull. At the west edge, where wind learns tactics, your lamp by the doors holds steady. You raise a hand near the flame to measure its temper. Heat hums like a thought that has stopped arguing. The stone beneath wears your earlier pinch of sand like good manners. By the cloth hall seam you rest your ear. No draft making a sermon, only the slow hush of large things doing their duty. The third bell is patient. It curls through the arcades and tucks around pillars. Your shoulders drop a finger's width. Your knees remember they are joints and not opinions. On the far side, a last cartwheel bumps a join and apologizes. You look without looking, the way people who live with squares learn to look. You cross the center for the sake of geometry. The air tastes cooler, as if the canal has claimed a small privilege. The stones here are flatter, trained by centuries of negotiation with wheels and pride. A moth floats through a lamp beam, writes its line, and disappears into the more intelligent dark. Your circle picks up the south side. The seamstress's bench, the cooper's staves, the fruit, seller's empty crates, stacked like folded thoughts, everything where it should be, nothing asking for a speech. You shift the crate stack half an inch so dawn does not knock a shin. The heap concedes, grateful without knowing it. Curfew arrives at last, slow enough for the city to meet it halfway. The bell's big note lifts your scalp and then lowers evening over the square like a blanket. 1-2 set long ago by men who like numbers tidy. 1-2 until the count proves what counts. Night is now. You do not hurry your feet. The sound chooses your pace and finds it already chosen. By the pump again, you count the drains backward to check you still can. 3, 2, 1. A cat emerges, examines your competence, and dismisses you as adequate. You accept the review. The belfry releases its last tone, a long breath slipping into the roof beams and staying there. You make the final yards of your circle and arrive where you began. All circles do that, and the best ones pretend to be lines. You stand, listening for what you hope not to hear. Nothing answers, no rattle, no rafter tick with ideas, no hinge remembering a grievance. The square holds its shape. You scratch a short line on your tablet perimeter walked. Curfew good, and add a dot for the watch, who will pass under the arch and give the air the sound of boots that have chosen civility. You tuck the chalk away and let the night be the most professional thing in Bruges. You start the outer circle the way a tailor checks hems. One steady circuit, no argument, hands ready to touch what needs touching. The square has thinned to outlines and intentions. Your lanterns keep modest puddles. Between them, the stones wear an even dimness that makes footsteps polite. Above, the belfry leans its long ear over the Markt, curious and unsurprised. You follow its shadow, past the fish stones forgetting their salt, past the pillar board's orderly whisper, past the cloth hall, it straps the color of sleeping iron. The first bell arrives like a measured yawn, not curfew yet, only the throat clearing. that tells roofs to put thoughts away. The note spreads along rafters and lowers down the walls until it rests on your shoulders. You let it settle, then keep on. At the north corner, you check the alley mouth that always believes it is a story. Nothing. Only a broom, lean of shadow, and the faint smell of soap from a basin behind a shutter. Your hand skims the corner stone, cool, plain, intent on being stone. You count drain covers as you go. A quiet arithmetic that persuades feet to behave. 1 by the pump, 2 near the tinker's pitch, 3 toward the canal, each sits square. A toe nudges the third. It answers with the dull, loyal note of iron that has no intention of traveling. You praise it by not lifting it. The next bell comes rounder, like a loaf that rose properly. Pigeons adjust their sleep. A window latches with the smallest click that still counts as a decision. Your route bends by the canal arch, where water trades your lanterns for a narrow ribbon. You rest a palm on the gate you soothed, and feel it tell you nothing. Good gates are dull. At the west edge, where wind learns tactics, your lamp by the doors holds steady. You raise a hand near the flame to measure its temper. Heat hums like a thought that has stopped arguing. The stone beneath wears your earlier pinch of sand like good manners. By the cloth hall seam, you lean your ear. No draft making a sermon, only the slow hush of large things doing their duty. The third bell is patient. It curls through the arcades and tucks around pillars. Your shoulders drop the width of a finger. Your knees remember they are joints, not opinions. On the far side, a cartwheel bumps a join and apologizes. You look without looking, the way people who live with squares learn to look. You cross the center for the sake of geometry. The air tastes cooler, as if the canal had claimed a small privilege. The stones here are flatter, trained by long negotiations with wheels and pride. A moth floats through a lamp beam, writes its line, and disappears into the more intelligent dark. Your circle picks up the south side. The seamstress's bench, the cooper's staves, the fruit, seller's empty crates stacked like folded thoughts, everything where it should be. Nothing asking for a speech. You shift the crate stack half an inch so dawn does not knock a shin. The heap concedes, grateful without knowing it. Curfew arrives at last, slow enough for the city to meet it halfway. The bell's big note lifts your scalp and then lays evening over the square like a blanket. 1, 2, 1, 2, until the count proves what counts. Night is now. You do not hurry your feet. The sound chooses your pace and finds it already chosen. By the pump again, you count the drains backward to prove you still can. 3, 2, 1. A cat emerges, examines your competence, and dismisses you as adequate. You accept the review. The belfry releases its last tone, a long breath sliding into the roof beams and staying there. You complete the circle and arrive where you began. The best circles pretend to be lines. You meet the night watch at the arch, where the square becomes a street, and the street pretends to be a river. 2 figures step from shadow, halberds upright like tidy saplings. Their coats smell of wool and old rain. Their boots speak the plain language of work. You hold out your wooden tally, smooth with years, and they trade you theirs, a short stick notched for the route they will walk. Words when they arrive are small and useful. Clear, they say. Mild. A drift toward the south lane. You answer in the same currency. Lanterns trimmed, north arcade down, cloth hall fast, canal gate content, south gate persuaded. Nobody tries to be interesting. The arch prefers agreements to conversations. You take the moment to study what matters. Eyes not fogged, hands not shaking, straps seated, buckles honest. One man adjusts the thong on his gauntlet until leather remembers its job. The other rubs his chin against the night, as if testing the temperature of trouble and finding none. You exchange routes like neighbors lending paths. They will swing by the shoemaker's yard, then the potter's lane, then back under the fish stones toward the Belfort steps. You will finish your circuit, copy numbers where ink belongs, seal the box, and return the keys to the niche. If a shutter wakes with a start, they will knock at your door. If a lamp sulks, you will scold it. The treaty is as old as hinges. Before parting, you hold your lantern so its small circle reaches their belts. A clasp shows where. You press it flat with a thumbnail and a nod. The man feels the improvement and accepts it as if he had planned it. In the watch, as at the market, pride is less useful than readiness. The halberds tilt in a courteous angle. Their iron points catch a star and let it go again. One man offers the weather's last news mist along the low canal. Nothing that will argue. You sniff, confirm, and tilt your head toward the square. He grins a line no wider than a thread. Then they step off, boots measuring the street with a tempo that sounds like modest safety. You watch them enter the far light and shrink to the size of the work. The arch swallows their echo. The market listens to your breath. You slide your tally into your pouch, feel for the notch that means you have been met, and find it. The watch is abroad, your keys are at home. You turn back toward the clerk's corner, where ink waits for small truths, and the sand tin hopes to be shaken. You sit at the clerk's table, where numbers feel larger than they look. The lantern casts a butter-colored square across the page. The rest of the room rests in patient brown. You open the ledger to the ribbon and lift the sand shaker with your left hand, the quill with your right. The feather tickles your knuckle. Ink turns the nib night wide and glossy. You copy the tablet's facts into sentences the book understands. Fees received from cloth, basket, herb, fish, lantern oil measured, wicks trimmed, weights tested, coffer locked, north arcade lowered, cloth hall fastened, brazier covered, gates set. You write the words as if laying planks straight, even one beside another, and the page becomes a floor that will hold tomorrow's feet. The quill scratches in a courteous way, like a mouse with excellent manners. Names arrive and seat themselves. The cloth merchant who ties quietly, the basket man with the cracked walnut, the herb woman whose jars shut like politeness, the fishmonger who rinses when reminded. You do not embroider. You do not judge. You record, which is the craft of letting the day remember itself. When a coin total appears, you pause and count with your fingers along the purse's edge 2, 2, 1. Then silver's temper, then the lean copper that told an old tale. The sum meets the posts on the tablet without quarrel. Sums like peace more than victory. A blot thinks about happening. You deny it with patience, rolling the nib on the knife, then kissing the point against the scrap. Ink returns to discipline. You finish the line, tip a fine rain of sand, and wait while the page takes a breath. Then you tilt, let the sand hiss back to the cup, and watch the lettering dull into good behavior. At the margin, you add the tiny dot you use for improved, a private cheer for the west door lamp, minding itself. Beside Southgate, another dot for oil given where complaint lived. The system is yours, but not secretive. It is simply a way to be thorough without speeches. From the drawer you fetch the folded notes, the stall exchange, the watchman reminder, the tinker's promise. You stack them neatly, ball the ribbon's loose tail, and set a pebble on top so the night cannot teach wind to be bold indoors. The room smells of horn, ink, and wood that remembers sun. You sign the bottom with the quiet signature the chamberlain likes short, legible, almost shy. The ledger accepts your name and grows heavier by the amount of care it holds. You close it with two hands and feel the covers meet like doors that respect one another. The lamp hums. The sand feels cool through the tin. It is time for wax. The rent box waits, with that calm a chest acquires from minding ordinary treasure. Oak sides, iron corners, lid with a lip that does not argue. You bring it close, sweep the table with your sleeve, and seat it where the lamp lays in honest light. The purse empties with the soft, grainy sound of coins completing a day. You sort without ceremony. Copper in families, silver like older cousins. The rare, heavier piece set where it will not teach the others to boast. You note the sum on a slip, match it to the ledger's line, and place the slip inside so tomorrow will greet itself without questions. The wax sits in its stick like patient honey made strict. You warm the little spoon against the lamp's collar, shave 2 curls, and watch them turn thoughtful. When the spoon's lip gives the smallest bright sigh, you tilt it into the notch the lid will cover. The pool settles with a neat edge, neither greedy nor stingy. Your seal is a plain stamp city, arms worn smooth by years of agreement. You breathe on it once so metal will not steal too much heat, then press it level into the red. The wax gives, accepts, and remembers. When you lift the stamp away, the impression looks modestly official, which is the tone you admire in all decisions. You tug the lid to be sure pride has not replaced function. It holds. You set the box a finger's length from the table's back edge, a habit that denies elbows their accidents. The key turns. The hasp sits, and iron forgets the day in favor of the night. For courtesy, you wrap the key in a strip of cloth against scratches, against the temptation to wring and place it in the small drawer where your hand finds it without looking. You blow across the cooling seal and watch its sheen dull from mirror to memory. The lamp flickers once, then behaves. A last tally on the tablet. Rent box sealed. Seal impressed. Sum recorded. You feel the square grow another degree quieter, as if coins, now boxed and stamped, had stopped thinking and agreed to sleep. You return the box to its corner, heavy with simplicity, and thank it silently for being exactly what it is, a container that does not dream. You take the broom for the last time, not to argue with dirt, but to flatter the floor into comfort. The great tasks are finished. Now you erase the small footprints your work has made of itself. Under the west lamp, the stone shows a sly shine where oil once thought to be memorable. You scatter a whisper of sand, then draw the broom across it until the glimmer becomes a courteous dull. Along the cloth hall step, you sweep the ridge of flour your boots invited. The bristles murmur. A husk clicks once, gives up, and rides the pan. You cross the center with a single, even stroke, as if writing your name without letters. The square accepts the line and folds itself smoother. By the pump, you find a new wet crescent where someone tested the handle after your round. No lecture. A slow fan of sand makes the crescent forget ambition. You encourage it with the heel of your boot and hear the dry, soft sound you trust. A cat walks through, decides not to comment, and vanishes into a lane made of shadow. You tilt the pan into the barrel. Peels, flour, 3 seeds, 1 opinionated crumb of wax. Ash hushes them. You settle the lid and pat it, because lids enjoy manners. The broom head gets a gentle rap to shake out the day, then a touch to tuck 2 straws back under their binding. Tools warm to courtesy. Near the canal arch, a draft is wagged a corner of paper free from the pillar board. You lift it, pin it square, and retie the ribbon with fingers that know the knot's mood. The papers sit obedient again, ready to be discovered by morning as if they had arranged themselves. You walk the full length once more, broom over shoulder, looking not for dirt, but for ease. No snags near benches, no loose brads where a hem could complain, no pebble offering to become a lesson. You pocket the pebble. Lessons belong in pockets at this hour. When you lean the broom in its nook, the room seems to lean with you, a little closer to rest. Your hands carry the faint rasp of straw and sand. You clap them softly, and the powder drifts down like a tiny local fog that knows when to stop. Final note on the tablet. Floor quiet. You set the chalk aside, your feet approved by standing still. At the open arch, you pause as if the night had held out a cup. Canal air slides in damp, reed sweet, faint with tar and rope. You drink it with your nose and feel your shoulders decide to be shoulders again. The lantern near the water makes a small gold ladder on black, steps that lead nowhere anyone sensible needs to go. From far off, a wheel hums cart on plank, then stone, then plank again. The sound arrives like a neighbor's yawn through a wall, not intrusive, only proof that someone else exists. You stand with your palm on the jamb and let the hum pass through you until it thins to the idea of sound. Somewhere, a watchman taps his staff on a curb, the agreed-upon punctuation for a street that prefers commas to exclamation. A dog answers once and thinks better of it. The wind brings Flower's ghost from a bakery that works late against good sense and for good bread. You forgive the baker on behalf of the city. You check the canal ring where boats tie their patience. The iron is cool, dry, interested in nothing. A rope tail skims the surface and writes a half circle that closes itself at once. You consider the south gate again, hear it still saying nothing, and let quiet win. On the tablet, you write a small sentence. Air clear, watch steady, because facts, even gentle ones, prefer a page to a pocket. You draw the curl that means the square may keep sleeping while the streets go on with their cautious business. The lantern breathes. You breathe. The arch drafts the first sketch of fog you will meet on the lane home. Near the weaver's bench, the forgotten basket waits, polite as a guest who found the wrong door. You lift it by the rim and feel the give of good willow, the spring that says a river once paid attention. The bench itself remembers its owner, a curl of shaved rod, a nail set proud, a scent like damp rope and sun. You carry the basket to the storage shelf, where found objects gather, until they are reclaimed by faces rather than names. A clean tag sits in the dish. You wet its end on your tongue, then write in your square letters. Basket from bench 5 returned to weaver. You tie the tag through a rib and let the knot sit neat. Small as a decision. You look it over like a groom looks a horse. Rim even, base true, handle sound. No split begging to grow. One reed whispers when you bend it. You rub a little tallow between finger and thumb and smooth the place so it will not gossip tomorrow. The basket answers by pretending it never complained. You set it where morning eyes cannot miss it. Front of the shelf, left side. The spot that reads urgent but calm. You make a note in the ledger's margin so the clerk will stage the reunion without speeches. The square appreciates reunions that occur before coffee and after scents. On the bench you leave a pebble from your pocket, a token the weaver will understand. I noticed. I mended. I kept it safe. You straighten the small pile of rods as if aligning the thoughts they will become. Then you dust your hands and let the basket wait for the right pair of palms. At the corner by the clerk's room, a dog sits with the patience of a saint who expects nothing and receives it graciously. Gray around the muzzle, burr in one ear, eyes the color of afternoon tea. You show both palms because bargains with dogs are public. From your pouch you bring the heel of bread you kept for exactly this conversation. You break it in two, then in two again, because gratitude likes small pieces. The dog accepts each crumb with the soft pinch of practiced politeness. Its tail writes a sentence that means, roughly, decent person, acceptable evening, proceed. You scratch the space between ear and collar where gratitude lives. The dog leans its head toward your knee and sighs a dry little sigh, the sound straw makes when you sit on it gently. For a moment you and the square share the same silence, a quiet free of accounts and hinges. You check the water bowl kept by the pump. A finger's depth remains, cool enough. You add 3 tilts from the dipper. Not more too much invites mischief. The dog drinks with the careful rhythm of a creature who respects its throat. When it finishes, it looks at you as if to confirm that the market will still be here in the morning. You confirm without speaking. As you turn to go, the dog rises, shakes once, and becomes a little cloud that settles immediately. You let your knuckles brush its shoulder. It accepts the farewell like a professional. Then it curls under the bench again, paws arranged as punctuation, and closes its eyes on a square it trusts. The niche, near the bailiff's office, holds the keys bed, a stout box with pegs inside, and a little door that locks with a sensible click. You bring your ring to the table, and lay each key out, as if setting spoons before supper. Cloth hall, north arcade, side gates, clerk's room, store, chest, each bow different, each tooth a memory in iron. You count them forward, then backward, then in the pattern your hand prefers. Long, short, heavy, light. Nothing missing, nothing sulking. You wipe each shank with the corner of your sleeve to lift the night's thin film of oil. Then hang them on their pegs in the order your morning fingers expect. The box offers the right lock to the right key, which is a pleasure every time. You feed the bit home and turn until the bolt thinks, then commits. The click is neat, competent, private. You test the door not to doubt it, but to give it the compliment of a second thought. It holds with the dignity of wood that has swallowed promises before. On the shelf below the box sits the tally board for the watch. You place your chit in its groove and see theirs waiting in answer. The roots match like 2 threads plaited without fuss. You add a brief line in the margin, watch met at arch, so tomorrow can praise itself for being predictable. You blow across your hands the way smiths do when they finish. The keys are no longer your responsibility. They are the city's again, sleeping in their little wooden dormitory. You close the niche, turn the outer key, and feel a mild lightness at your hip where iron used to live. You step into the lane that chooses the canal for a neighbor. Fog has begun its quiet project, rising from water in shreds that learn to be a veil. Your cloak finds your shoulders the way habit finds a chair. The city smells of malt and damp rope, a comfort that belongs to evenings that have given up ambition. Your steps take the narrow stones that stay level even when the world imagines tilt. A window shows the meekest light through horn. Somewhere a laugh tries itself once and stops, not wishing to be recalled by morning. You pass a door where yeast sleeps under a cloth. Its breath is warm as a pocket. The belfry is behind you now, a thoughtful wait, rather than a command. You count arches without meaning to one over the lane, one over the water, one that exists only because fog invents it. Your boots do not splash, you trained them. A rat writes a fast opinion along the wall and forgets it at once. You keep the canal on your left so your right hand finds brick should the lane grow narrower than memory says. The fog chooses a thickness that flatters caution. You like it. It makes every step a decided step, and your evening has been about decisions that do not bruise. At the turn by the cooper's yard, a smell of pitch tries for importance. You demote it with a breath and keep moving. Home waits 3 bends ahead, a door that understands your knuckles. You rehearse the sequence you love. Latch, step, hook, lamp, bowl, bed. The city, behind you, continues its slow, decent work of being asleep. Inside, the room accepts you without remark. You set the ledger on its shelf, the chalk on its ledge, the bell on its hook. Habit puts the bowl on the table and the jug beside it. You wash your hands in water that remembers stone and sky, then dry them on the towel that remembers sun. Supper is the quiet kind that suits a keeper of latches. A slice of bread, a curl of cheese, a modest onion cut with the knife that does everything. You chew without hurry and let the taste explain itself. A swallow of small beer stands beside the plate like a polite clerk. After, you fetch the glove with the open seam where thumb meets palm. Needle, thread, the little beeswax you keep in a walnut shell, all present. You wax the thread, pinch the knot, and stitch 3, 4, 5 small, respectful bites through leather. The seam closes as if it had only meant to yawn. You set tomorrow's tools in reach. The tablet's clean face, a fresh stub of chalk, the oiled rag, the tiny wrench, the spare wick. Each has its corner. Each promises to be found at dawn by the same hand that puts it down now. You like a room that believes in continuity. A final look from the window finds the square, mostly an idea. A dark plain with a few obedient lights where you left them. You lower the shutter to the finger's width that teaches drafts good manners. Your shoulders discover they have put down the day. Your feet thank your boots and stop. You lie down and the straw mattress answers with a long, rustling yes. The blanket smells of soap and outside, the kind of clean that owes a debt to wind. You pull it to your chin and let your breath become the market's breath slow, even counting only what helps. The room speaks softly, a board settling, the roof learning the night's weight, the bell far off, asleep with one ear open. Your hands, idle at last, remember keys by the memory of weight and then forget them, which is what you ask them to do. You review the square the way a shepherd counts. Not the coins or posts, just the places north arcade down. Cloth hall fast, lamps modest, brazier safe, gates persuaded, box sealed, board tidied. Each answer arrives like a door closing without scolding. Enough. You let the route home fold into the pillow. Fog, malt, a window's thin light, the dog's careful tail, the watch at the arch, your own bell saying 3, 2, 1. The sounds turn small and less separate. They move to the edge of thought and sit. Somewhere a gull decides against speaking. Somewhere a cat changes corners. In your chest, breath travels the same street again and again, always finding it open. The market sleeps because you told it how. You sleep because telling was simple work done kindly. You lie very still and let night finish its small, patient errands. The square keeps breathing in slow rectangles of shadow. Lamps do their modest work, not demanding, only present. You allow the sounds to sort themselves. The far canal loosening a rope, a board remembering its place, a watchman's step becoming part of the road. You do not follow any of it. You let it pass like soft weather. Your hands forget the weight of keys. Your pockets forget the careful clutter of pins and cord. Your boots remember only straw and the decision not to move. The day goes on without you, which is its gift. You keep the simpler task. Rest like a door settled into its frame. Breath arrives, then leaves, with no argument. You match it to the square's slower rhythm until both are one thing. Cool air gathers at the floor and climbs without hurry. The blanket holds a line of warmth across your ribs and chooses to remain. You visit the Markt once more, but only in outline. A shutter lowers itself. A latch finds the little iron square that means enough. A broom leans where it belongs. The bell hangs on its peg and thinks of nothing. Cats fold into thinner shadows and practice not caring. The cloth hall counts 0, which is the easiest number. You do not assemble this. It assembles itself and sets down beside you like a well-behaved dog. You turn your face lightly toward the quieter side of the pillow. You practice having no plans. You keep practicing until practice and sleep become the same useful craft. The square holds. The locks hold. You hold without holding anything at all. Morning will find every hinge polite. For now, you drift, unneeded, thoroughly, deeply, easily, asleep at last. We hope this slow day at an old trade has been a peaceful escape. If you found it comforting, you may like, share, or leave a thoughtful note. And you can subscribe, so you'll be with us for the next quiet craft from the past. End of script. Sweet dreams.